It's 12 noon in London, 7 a.m. in Philadelphia, and around the world, it's time for the Giddy Carousel of Pop. Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Giddy Carousel of Pop, the podcast where we take an old issue of the swingerilliant pop mag Smash Hits and have a good nose through its pages. And as Live Aid celebrates its 35th anniversary in July 2020, we'll be looking at the corresponding issue of The Hits from the 17th to the 30th of July 1985 with a cast of thousands to help us along the way. We'll be hearing from David Hepworth, Mark Ellen and Barry McIlheney, three former Smash Hits editors, and also hit staffer William Shaw, who were all at Wembley Stadium on the day, along with TV director David G Croft, one of the people responsible for what we saw on our TVs. Plus, some of you lot, our Pop Kid listeners, have sent us their memories of the biggest shared pop event we've ever experienced. But before we get any further, let's do some introductions and welcome our guest. I'm Simon Galloway, and with me, as ever, he's narrowly avoided being scissor-kicked by Adamant and a groping by Bono just to be with us. Will you meet and greet Mr. Gavin Hogg?
Oh, thank you. It's true, all that happened, yeah.
And to assist us on our quest, joining us live from Phil Collins's Concorde, it gives us great pleasure to welcome back to the carousel, Tim Robinson.
You can hear me from the captain's station up here on the Concorde. Yeah, I'm here with my arm around Phil Collins. Delighted to be back and always in reception for you guys. And if listeners who know Smash Hits well, in reception was always the euphemism for readily available to appear. So I'm sat here in the reception with Marilyn and Belouis some. More of him later.
As always, if you want to read along with us, you can do just that, thanks to a couple of amazing websites, Brian McCloskey's Like Punk Never Happened and Smash Hits Remembered. You'll find links to the scans of this issue in the show notes, along with Spotify and YouTube playlists that include pretty much all the songs and artists featured in this historic issue of the mag. And you'll also find these links on our websites, giddypoppod.home.blog, and over on our Twitter and Facebook feeds. Just search for the Giddy Carousel of Pop or at Giddy Pop Pod. Now, we've got loads to cover, so we'll be splitting the podcast into two parts. In this first part, we'll be looking at the Smash Hits coverage of Live Aid, plus the concert itself, and also how it was covered elsewhere in the music press. And in part two, we'll be going through the rest of this issue of The Hits as we would normally. So there's just one thing we need to know. Where were you on the 13th of July 1985? And what were you doing?
I just kind of remember this huge thing, what was happening on the television, and I must have been quite of a talker when I was a child because my dad sponsored me to be silent through the whole thing, which I think I probably did a couple of hours, but okay. I was a massive Paul Young fan. I was looking out for him, really.
We went to the Royal Tournament at Earls Court in West London, and I can remember Status Quo kicked it off with, is it Rocking All Over the World? As we parked the car. And of course then it's sort of chaps from the Navy pulling big guns around for the next 4 or 5 hours. Then we must have got back home to Essex. Would have been dark by then, I think. Be the all joining each other on stage for the final sing-along, I think. So yeah, I remember almost nothing about Live Aid.
So that's what Pop Kids Joanne Fishwick and Brett Tremble were up to. But Tim, what about you?
Right, well, I think last time I was on this show, amazingly, I've been on before, I was still in what is now known as East Riding of Yorkshire in the then North Humber side, in a not very picturesque sort of what I would describe as an industrial village, sort of industrially farmed area, flat as a pancake, see from fields of barley for miles around. And all I remember doing is being really excited about Live Aid, spending the day sat in our front room. I think my sister was upstairs because she was poorly, so she was watching Spandau Ballet from her bed with a bottle of Lucozade and a comic, a copy of Smash Hits probably, and I would have been sat downstairs with my mum, and I think we watched pretty much all of the BBC 2, by the way, broadcast. It wasn't on BBC One, I've just found out, and just watched pretty much all of it, probably dipped in and out. I wasn't a huge Brian Ferry fan, unlike the very sophisticated Simon G there, who was probably on, by this time was on to Phil Manzarek solo albums. So I was a bit nonplussed with some of it. But I think I pretty much watched on that beautiful sunny afternoon the whole thing from right up until, the chorus of Feed the World. And I think I probably dipped out when we got onto sort of, the USA stuff later on, like most people, yeah. So that's what I was doing then.
So who were you looking forward to seeing on the day?
I'll tell you, because I remember this vividly. I was quite excited to see Tears for Fears, because I'd quite liked the last couple of singles. Was it around Songs from the Big Chair this sort of time?
Yes.
I can't remember. Yeah. Anyway, I remember hearing them on the radio, and I remember thinking, oh, that would be good. I'd like to see them. I'd like to sort of see them, in action and see how they sound live. I was hoping Frankie Goes to Hollywood might put in an appearance, because I'd always wondered what it might be like to see them performing. And neither of those showed up. Instead of Tears for Fears, because they were a last-minute cancellation, we got to see George Thorogood and the Destroyers live from Philadelphia. And I think everyone can hand on heart say they remember the day and the minute and exactly what they were doing when George Thorogood and the Destroyers, basically bossed Live Aid completely. And, that's the abiding memory most people have of the day, isn't it?
And a nation said, who?
So, yeah, Tears for Fears let me down. I never really got into them since, really, other than the best of Tears for Fears, which I've got from a charity shop. So, yeah.
What about you, Gavin? What were you up to on July the 13th, 1985?
It's a very sad tale. Very sad tale. I have my diary. Saturday, July the 13th, 1985. Today was Live Aid. Went to a dog show at Malvern and saw Auntie Sandra and Uncle Jeff. Adam Ant was on Live Aid, but I only heard him on the radio. And therein just, lies a whole sad tale, really. So I was 15, very excited, because Adam Ant was going to be on. I was a massive Ant fan. And the day before Live Aid is on the Friday, my mum says, we're going to Malvern tomorrow. It's a dog show. Your Auntie Sandra and Uncle Jeff are coming up to show their shelties. And I was like, but it's Live Aid. I need to watch. No, you're coming to the dog show. I was like, Mum, it's Live Aid. But she just didn't understand. So I got dragged to this fucking dog show. I mean, we didn't even have any dogs. She just wanted to see her sister, my Auntie Sandra. It was lovely. She was a great aunt. But, it wasn't the same as seeing Live Aid. So as a concession, my mum let me take the radio along with me and some headphones. But, that wasn't the same, was it? So I was sat in this bloody field with a load of dogs, watching them being paraded around, just thinking, all my mates are going to be watching. The worst thing was, when I got there, my Auntie Sandra and Uncle Jeff were really surprised to see me. And they were like, oh, did you not want to watch Live Aid? Yeah, I did want to watch Live Aid. My mum dragged me here. I didn't want to come in. They got out of it, and it was their fucking dogs that were being exhibited. So, yeah, I've still not really forgiven me mum, I've not been to see her during lockdown. No, that's not true. but yeah, it's still... So that short diary entry, that kind of covers a host of disappointment, regret and tears,
Terse, I think we can call it.
Yeah, very terse. When I got back, I just had to make do with watching, because I think by the time we got back, it was just the American stuff, which I wasn't really asked about, All I really wanted was to see Adam Ant. David Bowie would have been enjoyable, but... I think I just came in at George Thorogood and the Destroyers. So, very, very disappointing. Yeah, it still rankles. I don't know if it comes across, but it still rankles a little. What about you, Si? What were you doing?
Well, I'd spent that morning going through the newspaper. We got the Sheffield Star delivered, and it was the weekend edition. It had the TV guide in it, and they had a breakdown of everybody that was going to be playing throughout the day and the times that they were going to be on. And I decided that I was going to tape some of it, and I was looking through trying to decide what to record, and because obviously we knew about this. It had been built up for a few weeks. There'd been a big thing about it in Smash Hits in the issue before, saying how it was going to be technically achieved and the sorts of people that were going to be playing and stuff. And I was a big David Bowie fan, big Roxy Music fan, so absolutely looking forward to Bowie and Brian Ferry. And as we approached midday, I just couldn't decide what was going to tape. So instead, I just rifled around my bedroom and found every blank tape that I could possibly lay my hands on, and decided that I was just going to tape the whole lot, start to finish, just put those tapes in and press record and just let it record whatever happened. But that meant that I was up in my bedroom, which is where the good hi-fi was. For some reason, I'd ended up with my brother's really nifty JVC separate system in my bedroom. Well, I know what the reason was. He lived in a dodgy flat in a dodgy part of Sheffield. Now a Grade 2 listed building, but that's another story. So I ended up watching Live Aid on a little black and white portable television in my bedroom pretty much all day, listening to it in wonderful VHF stereo on Radio 1 and taping it all. We didn't have a video recorder, so I was just recording it all for the radio. And this issue of Smash Hits, when this came out, because I listened to those tapes rather a lot, I'd read that Smash Hits along with it. So that was my version of having a video recorder, was reading along the Smash Hits whilst I was listening to my tapes of, Richard Skinner reading out the phone numbers and bank addresses and things like that. And then, just kept turning those tapes and putting the new tapes in. And then at some point I fell asleep. Probably around about 2 a.m. if you look at the tapes and where it gets up to. And unbeknownst to me, whilst after I'd nodded off, somebody came in and switched off the stereo and the tape recorder and switched off the telly. So my tapes stop at Duran Duran, partway through Union of the Snake. And from that point on, I didn't see any of it because I was fast asleep until there was a thunderstorm that woke me up, and I saw the last few minutes, saw a little bit of Bob Dylan, and then all the congregated masses of Philadelphia singing We Are the World.
Yeah.
And only yesterday have I seen and heard that missing kind of 2 to 3 hours that I missed back in 85. So I've now seen the whole of Duran Duran, and I've seen Patti LaBelle and Black Sabbath. Who knew I never even knew Black Sabbath played at Live Aid. And Hall & Oates. Man, that was a set. They were really good. And Mick Jagger and Tina Turner. So I was aware that these people played, but never seen or heard any of that before, despite owning the official DVDs as well. Never made it that far in the official DVDs. But nobody confessed to coming in and switching off the stereo and the telly after I'd nodded off. No one would own up to it. They kind of made it sound as though I'd done it in my sleep, that I'd done that myself.
You would never have done that, Si, would you? I know you. You would never have done that.
No, I wouldn't have done that. I mean, that's pretty bad, isn't it? Gaslighting a 12-year-old. What's all that about?
You reached out in horror and when Simon Le Bon hit that really bum note during is it View to a Kill?
View to a Kill, yeah.
It was slammed it off. Yeah. Did you get that bit?
I had got that bit, yeah. I used to rewind that bit and listen to it over and over again because it's such a moment, that, isn't it?
All we need.
Gav, I feel a little bit guilty now that we're talking about this and you missed out. And I'm guessing you've seen highlights and stuff since.
I've seen bits, but to be honest, I was kind of emotionally traumatised by the experience, so it's still quite hard for me to watch it. It sounds ridiculous as a 50-year-old man 35 years later, but it's still kind of like the one that got away a little bit for me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I should have been there watching it, and I couldn't because of my mother that just didn't understand. And, and I wasn't a rebellious enough teenager just go, well, F you, Mum, I'm not coming anywhere, you can't make me. I'd never have dreamed of doing that, so I just had to do what my mum said, But, yeah, I've seen bits.
Well, this will be a cathartic experience for you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So we will dive into that issue of Smash Hits now. Bob Geldof on the front, fist in the air. He did it. Live Aid, one day that shook the world. Plus Adamant, Phil Oakey, Spandau Ballet, Bruce Springsteen, Bucks Fizz, Belouis Son. And when you turn the page and open up Smash Hits, Live Aid dominates about the first 10 or so pages of this. And actually the first thing you see in the magazine is not a pop star. It's not anybody on stage at Live Aid. It's the crowd at Wembley, that 72,000 strong crowd that filled the stadium that day. And the first people that are spoken to in the feature as well are punters. We'll get to them in a minute, but it was kind of like a cast of thousands that put this piece together. One of those people being William Shaw. And so I dropped him a line to see what he remembers of the day and of working on this issue. And he sent me this email back. He said, I was designated to be in the crowd all day. This was pre-mobile phones, so I had to find phone boxes to call in copy, and they were really scarce and busy. There were people everywhere, backstage and all around. Lots of the best copy was, as it turned out, written by Tom Hibbert, who was watching it on the telly. About 2% of what I phoned in was used because there was so much stuff going on. It was also a pretty bold thing to do. Our cover date was 4 days after Live Aid. Technically, it was insanely challenging to get that issue out and distributed in that time. But it says a lot about the insane kind of ambition that was growing in Smash Hits at the time. To do things not just at the edge of culture, but right at the centre of it. And also says a lot about the way we were engaged with print technology at the time. Colour magazines would normally go to bed long before they appeared on the shelves, but Pop had to be current. And I also interviewed the Redskins. Who knew? So we get those fans. First of all, Maggot, Phil, Brian and Baggy from Chelmsford, all dressed in denim waistcoats and studded, are they bracelets? I don't know what you call them. And
those kind of wristband things, aren't they? Yeah, studded wristbands, I think.
Who have they come to see? Well, Status Quo, of course. And then there's another bunch of punters there as well. Nick from Gerrard's Cross. We got up at 7 to be here in time and ended up missing 2 trains. So there was nothing to do but cracking open the beer. He's arrived with Lynn and Rod, also from Chelmsford, whose dad ended up queuing for 5 hours to get their tickets. So I think it's telling that it's that shot of the crowd that we see first, and also they speak to the punters first before we even get to any of the pop stars.
Well, they were the stars of the show. They were the stars of the show. The one thing that I remember we were all astonished by when watching it, bear in mind this is long before you ever saw footage of Glastonbury, rolling footage every time there's a Glastonbury or Reading festival. You didn't see huge crowds filling Wembley like that on live on television. And they made the day, we're doing the overhead hand claps, and it was all about the crowd, really, wasn't it? They were the stars. And I remember being really excited about the fact, I do remember that this seemed to have been turned around really quickly. And when Smash Hits arrived, it was like, they've got a whole report on Live Aid already. And there's a timeline, and who doesn't like a timeline? And all these, I remember all these little pictures. And every time you see, to this day, if you pick up a magazine and there's an overview of Live Aid, it's always timeline, and they've got the clock, and the documentary which was on, remember, and it starts with the countdown clock, and it's always about that tension of, is this thing actually going to happen? Kind of captured there.
Yeah, I think you're right about the audience, the crowd that were there. But the other thing is, like I say, we'd never seen that sort of thing live on telly before. Nobody was telling them how to act. Nobody was telling them how to respond or behave on that day. It was all just kind of spontaneous. It was all just happening. Like I say, we hadn't seen anything like that before, so they didn't know. They weren't copying behaviour. It was all just there and happening on the day. And that moment in Radio Gaga, when you see all the crowd doing, the clapping thing above their heads, like we'd all seen in the video the year before, that was just, I remember hearing my mum and my brother from downstairs going, wow! And even on my little black and white portable telly, that just looked amazing. And you just felt like that this crowd was just, absolutely carrying the day. Yeah,
that's a good point you make about people not having a set kind of way of behaving, and they were just responding as just punters, without that kind of, because like now when Glastonbury's on, people have like this festival wear now, isn't there? And there's things that you do at a festival, But then it was just a big pop concert. It was the first one, I guess, of that size. It was going to be on telly, and so there was no prescriptive kind of set of behaviour, or there wasn't a certain way to do things. It was just spontaneous, and and I think that's a beautiful thing about it.
You wouldn't be able to see it for flags now, would you?
Exactly, yeah, right.
What's good in this is that there are a few quotes from some of the people who played at Live Aid, so obviously being grabbed backstage either before or after they went on, and they have a little chat with Francis Rossi. He says, I never used to like Bob Geldof at all. I thought he was a bit of a loudmouth, but now he seems really nice and pleasant.
I wanted to talk about Paul Weller as well because we did the Band-Aid one a while ago, and there was a little interview with him during the recording of Do They Know It's Christmas, and he was talking about kind of being on his own and not really mingling too much with the other pop stars. And it's the same thing again here. He says, there's no one backstage I particularly want to meet. I can't talk to those people. But and then what's interesting as well is he talks about setting up a musicians' union to get people involved sort of in the political side of things, which I guess is probably, looking at the timeline, was perhaps the sort of seed of an idea for Red Wedge.
Yeah, definitely.
He's talking about maybe meeting up and, getting more political. So he's not made himself any more popular in the months since Band-Aid, has he, with his fellow pop stars?
No. I mean, their set on the day really won me round, really sort of, turned me on to the Style Council. Obviously, I was aware of Paul Weller and the Style Council, but after that, I started buying all their records, and it was purely down to that performance. So, Gav, just talking about Adam Ant.
Oh, yeah.
Does it make it any better that he just went on and did 35 years on, and this is the one of the things that people still talk about, that he went on and, out of all the songs that he could have sung, some of the Ants classics, or maybe even something like Goody Two Shoes, he goes on and performs his brand spanking new single that don't think it was even in the charts yet. Just gets that one song, that's it, on and off, Vive la Rock.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think he gets a bad rap, a bad Ant rap, if you will. Thank you. And I got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about this, actually, because I do think he's been unfairly criticised. I think initially he was due to do 3 or 4 songs, and it kind of kept, as more sort of big names like Bowie and so on got added to the list, his set got shorter and shorter until at the end, Geldof just told him he just wanted one song. And at the time, what we've got to remember is a lot of the other acts were doing, like Bad is an album track, and Boomtown Rats, Drag Me Down, which had only got to number 50 the year before,
Well, most of Brian Ferry's set was from the new album, wasn't it?
Yeah, Brian Ferry did 3 tracks from his new album, admittedly one of them a top 10 single, and the album had been at number 1 the month before, and then he did Jealous Guy. But we'll get onto the wasted opportunity of Mr. Ferry in a short while. But yeah, Status Quo did an album track, the Style Council did an album track.
Spandau did.
Exactly, and, what I was going to say was that sort of nostalgia thing of, you just come on and you do your big hits. I mean, Weller didn't do any jam songs, whatever, It didn't really exist then. I don't think there was that same expectation on people. And it's only now, looking back, that people criticise him for doing his new single. I mean, it wasn't like a ballad, it was it's maybe not his finest song, but it's not a terrible song, it's upbeat.
Not at all, no.
And it's a nice message, Viva la Rock, because the day was about music and positivity. And so it's got that element to it as well. So I really think he's kind of suffered a bit of revisionism, over the years. And the fact that, because, you think, well, some people, if they were told at the end, you can only do one song, they might just go, I'm not doing it then, see you later, mate. But he still went and did it. And it was one of the most energetic performances out of everyone. I mean, he could barely sing by like the third verse, poor lad, He was really, if you watch it now, you think, no, he's really going for it. So, I'm here to defend the Ant,
But even the caption in Smash It says, some of the crowd don't seem to recognise the revamped Ant. Who the hell's that? Shouts a perplexed onlooker.
Well, I mean, 3 years before, he was the biggest thing ever. It just showed how quickly the pop world was turning at that time. It was a couple of years after your heyday. You were virtually unknown. You were, he was pretty close to the edge of Le Dumper at that stage, wasn't he, really?
He was peering over the edge of the dumper, reaching down, and Bluster Blood Vessel was in there trying to pull him in. But I think that was probably what Sir Bob was thinking at the time when he was hacking the set list down and sort of insisting that Ant only had one number. I think he had him there under sufferance as well. I don't think Bob wanted him there at all. Bear in mind, it's 2 years since he'd had a sort of, I think Puss in Boots was the last big hit, a top 10, I think. From what I understand, Miles Copeland was Adam Ant's manager at the time, and he was also Sting's manager. And the message was, no Ant, no Sting, which I think is rather nice.
That's true. I'd forgotten about that bit, actually, yeah. I had read that.
But like you say, if he'd had a chance to do a couple of songs, if he'd had a chance to do a couple of numbers and one that people knew, but given the way that he was, the amount of energy he was putting into the performance, who knows, we could have been talking about the comeback of Adamant rather than Queen, right?
Yeah, I think you're right, Tim. I think it could have gone another way if it had had one more song, but there we go.
He should have held out a big sort of swag bag with Live Aid written on it and demanded people throw money in it and sing Stand and Deliver. Like, get them to, get them to throw wadges of cash into the bag. That would have been brilliant. Money all your life.
And it's at this point in the proceedings that it's probably a good time to hear from somebody who actually played at Live Aid, and relevant to what we've just been talking about, because Gav and I had the chance to talk to Marco Pirroni, and of course we had to ask him about Live Aid.
Si's a big Live Aid fan, and obviously you played there, and I did listen to another fairly recent podcast, and you said you remembered virtually nothing at all from the day.
I remember, all I remember was that there was, behind the stage was like a traffic light, and you were told to sort of like start playing. Like, if it was red, don't play. If it was green, start playing. I thought, well, where is it? I can't see it. And I've got really great eyesight. I couldn't bloody see it. And Adam's got terrible eyesight, so I thought it was up to me. I've got to find it, haven't I? Where is it?
So if you didn't need enough pressure,
right?
you got to look at this bloody traffic light.
Exactly. The only other thing I remember at the time was like thinking, I really need a cigarette. And I didn't smoke at the time.
Yeah.
I thought, why do I need a cigarette? And I don't smoke.
Yeah, I think that would make anyone smoke.
Yeah. But it was a good experience. I mean, I'm really glad, that we were there. Really glad that, one of the big things of the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, do you wish you'd had longer than the one song?
Yeah. And I can't remember why we didn't now.
Yeah, I've read a few different reasons why.
There is a few different reasons. Yeah. I don't know them all.
Yeah.
And it's just probably all those reasons all together.
What would you have played then? Had you had the chance to do more than
we
one
probably would
song?
have done Ant Music and Dog Eat Dog and Stand and Deliver probably.
Yeah.
Do our biggest hits. This is what people want to hear, isn't it?
Because sometimes people are very quite down on the band playing Vive la Rock, but my argument is always that, at the time there wasn't really that kind of heritage thing really, and there wasn't the expectation, and when you look at the tunes that a lot of other bands played, it was singles that hadn't even broken the top 40 or sometimes album tracks, and it wasn't kind of a catalogue of the biggest hits. It wasn't kind of festival kind of...
No, but we had a snap decision, like play it or not play it. Yeah, maybe we wouldn't have done it, if we had like a week to think about it.
Yeah.
But we didn't.
Yeah.
So.
My name is Lynn Lockwood, and I was 14 on the day of Live Aid, and I was living in Bishop Stortford in Hertfordshire, attending a rather posh all-girls school, just kind of getting into music. And I definitely watched the whole of Live Aid in our front room, sat 2 inches away from the telly, and I just kind of imagine my mum and my stepdad and my stepsister coming in and out and trying to prise me away from the telly and not really managing. So I probably just sat there with the dog all day long. I have hazy memories of actually what was on that day. I have hazy impressions, but I definitely always had a strong memory of Adamant. And at that time, I was just kind of coming out of my Howard Jones phase and just getting into things like The Cure and Susie and the Bunches. And so I was really kind of discovering music and probably starting to get a bit snobby about it. And I loved Adamant when I was 10 and he was singing Stand and Deliver. And now, 4 years later, 5 years later, at the grand old age of 14, I just thought he was embarrassing. It was like watching my granddad. I was completely outraged watching him. So, yeah, I kind of remember huffing and puffing all the way through it. And I know he got quite a lot of bad press for it anyway. However, watching it again, watching his performance again, I think it was great. And I feel a bit sorry for Adam that we all slagged him off at the time. I thought he did a really good job, and I think the song Vive la Rock just had a great message for the show about, the importance of rock and pop music. So well done, Adam. You did a good job on that day.
Next up on the bill, it's your local friendly mid-year with his synth-pop combo, Ultravox.
Well, the only thing about Ultravox is that I think that's one of the best images. If you think about, like, the one that's I could bring to mind if I think about Live Aid is mid-year, with his mirror shades on. It's perfectly blue sky, it's a beautiful sunny day, and the audience reflected back in Midge's mirror shades whilst wearing a very, very hot looking jacket. Speaking of which, Spandau also employed the very, very hot overcoat, didn't they, as well? But that's an abiding memory. Yeah, not the set isn't great. If you listen to the set, it's pretty clunky. The synths is all going out of tune. I think they're just winging it a bit on the technical front. But hey,
Well, Gary Kemp, who's got a very bright orange blouse on, basically, completely unbuttoned, and Smash It, have a quick chat with him. It went very quickly. The greatest moment of my life, and it just flashed by. I can't believe they're just wheeling the bands on and off. Normally, you come off stage and loads of people are giving you towels and drinks and things. I fell off the stage and nobody gave a toss.
And it says, 1405, Spandau Ballet retired to the backstage area for a few glasses of rock and roll mouthwash. Which is a Smash It's classic, isn't it?
Yeah. Nick Kershaw, I've been digging around a bit because he says after his set, he tells Smash It's, I didn't enjoy it really. It was a bit fraught, a lot more so than supporting Elton John last year, because he also supported Elton John at Wembley Stadium. Is there anyone I'd like to meet backstage? Yeah, Sherry, my wife. So I did a bit of digging on this because principally I was looking for a particular photo of Nick Kershaw during his set at Live Aid that I've got it in a Live Aid souvenir that I bought from Asda a few weeks later that I cannot find anywhere. I've spent hours in the loft this morning and go through the Galloway archive, which was a box in the wardrobe with all loads of memorabilia and stuff like that. I found my handwritten notes for the tapes of Live Aid and little cuttings out and all sorts of things. Could not find this souvenir, but there's a photo in there of Nick Kershaw on stage. We all know he's a rather short chap, but he looks like he's lost in a forest of mic stands that are all kind of towering above him. It's just this little Nick Kershaw, and then all these big mic stands. I can't find it anywhere. One of these, when I find it, I will share it. But yeah, so in searching for this, I found an interview that he did with a Suffolk newspaper who were talking to, it's like an anniversary piece, talking to stars of Suffolk who appeared at Live Aid. There's more than you'd think. And basically, he got the fear big time, and I think he was just absolutely bricking it, basically on the verge of having a panic attack for pretty much his entire set, forgetting the words and just really anxious about the whole thing. So yeah, it just completely got the fear, and still when he talks about it now, it is drenched with all this terror that was coursing through his veins on that day, and he just cannot. The poor guy's traumatised. I think he needs a bit of therapy about it, to be honest.
I bet he wish he'd gone to a dog show instead, eh?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing about a lot of the bands, especially the pop groups. Nick Kershaw is probably normally playing at the Cliffs Pavilion, Southend, or Bath Moles Club, or Cambridge Corn Exchange. Paul Young had never played a stadium in his life. The biggest venue most of these groups would have played with someone like the Manchester Apollo, and there they are in front of 72,000 people. I can understand them being a little bit nervous, and also not really having in their arsenal of sort of stagecraft the ability to know how to put themselves across to a crowd of that size. I doubt Mr. Ant and all the rest of them really knew how to do the stadium rock thing, which is why as soon as Bobo and Freddie Mercury get on stage, the crowd are in the palm of their hands, because those guys have played enormous domes before. But the rest of them, Paul Young's never stood and looked at that number of people and rocked out. Weller looks nervous, they all look a bit, not surprised. And there's only 1 billion people watching on the telly, so don't worry.
But Nick Kershaw, one of my favourite awful moments of Live Aid is during the riddle, and it gets to the instrumental break in the riddle, and he invites the whole of Wembley Stadium, and he says this, "I want to see you whistle." And then he starts he purses his lips and starts whistling, showing Wembley Stadium how to whistle, and then the camera luckily cuts away from him. But my God, I want to see you whistle.
Come on, Wembley, let's whistle.
But yeah, Smash It's rightly point out that it's the Spans that get the first excited screams of the day. So they were the first proper pin-ups of the day that were playing at Wembley, and everybody gets a little bit excited for them.
The one thing they got wrong, if you watch it back, and yes, listeners, I have sat through quite a lot of Spandau Ballet on Live Aid recently, is they do the slow numbers, but they speed them up to a ludicrous degree. So True, which is this lovely slow ballad, is like, so true, funny how it is. It's almost like a stomper. They just speed it right up. I guess because they want to get more songs into the set, and because maybe they're worried that the audience will be turned off by a slow number. Completely missing the point that it's a hot sunny day, and what do people like doing in stadiums if they're not jumping and singing? They like a sway with their arms in the air, and they want to glide from side to side, which is exactly what you would do to True. The other big mistake they made was playing a track called Virgin, which was an album track, I'm not sure.
It hadn't even been released at that point.
Yeah,
a brand new song that didn't come out until the following year.
And it didn't play Gold. And Hadley, to this day, has regretted that they didn't play Gold. So there.
So I thought it'd be interesting to get some behind-the-scenes perspectives from the day, lift the curtain on Live Aid, if you will. And I had a little chat with TV director David G Croft, who was one of 3 BBC directors who were responsible for what we saw on our TV screens that day.
My memory's a bit hazy. I know that I directed Spandau Ballet, Sade, Elvis Costello, definitely Bowie and The Who. We were doing what's called as busking it. So we had no script, no pre-prepared script. We knew where our cameras were. We'd learnt the music. You call the shots live. And I was also vision mixing. So I was doing my own cutting. So I was calling the shots, cutting to that camera, calling the next shot, cutting to that camera. So Spandau Ballet starts, off we go. And the senior cameraman came over, talked back and said, "David, why are you shouting?" And I said, "I'm really sorry." And it was just my nerves. And I was okay after that. We were an outside broadcast unit, or an OB. So basically, an OB is a television studio in trucks. So I'm sitting in a truck. The sound guys are in a separate truck. And there's another truck because they were going to record. Even though we were going out live, they were still going to record it. So there was another truck for that. I think during the day, it began to dawn on me that, it was a bigger concert than I thought. At one point, Bob Geldof was on the air and said 1 billion people watching. And I thought, okay, that's not going to that's making me feel nervous now, Bob. But 1 billion people are watching. And if I don't do this particularly well, but I think all the directors, the whole production team acquitted itself brilliantly, given how quickly it was pulled together, in fact, fantastic work by all of the BBC people that were involved in it. It was a fantastic effort. The 2 big bands, I think, that I remember doing were David Bowie and The Who. And I was really looking forward to doing that. The Who's performance, quite famous because that's when we had a blackout. The mains went, the giant fuse at Wembley blew. So I'm sitting here going, what the hell is going on? And I don't know, suddenly all the screens came back up again. It all fired back up again, and you just have to carry on, and that's what we did. But a very scary moment for everybody. There is one piece that I watch, that I directed, that gives me a tingle. It's David Bowie doing TVC15. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It's also a good example of how when you're a director at a live concert, you've got to be prepared for anything, because he jumped down into the camera pit. I didn't know he was going to do that. Neither did the cameraman. What does it mean to me? I think I'm very lucky to have been involved in a show like Live Aid that does have a lasting cultural legacy. So for me, I am fantastically proud of being associated with a program that people still want to talk about. And I think the other thing that's important is it's a snapshot of the immense rock and pop talent that was around at that time in the United Kingdom.
So then we hit the kind of the mid-afternoon lull. The heat's it's getting hotter in Wembley Stadium. And we get Sade, Sting, Phil Collins, Howard Jones, all just kind of drifting by on the telly. At 14:52, in Smash Hits. They point out, it is now announced that 1.5 billion people around the world are watching Live Aid, but how many of them have ever heard of Dennis Waterman or Rula Lenska, who are now being interviewed on TV backstage, one wonders.
5.
Yeah.
I think.
I watched Sade back, which I don't remember watching at the time, or I wasn't paying that much attention. Midway through, the crowd just suddenly give a massive cheer, and I think it's just because she's taking her jacket off and she's got kind of nice backless dress on, and they're just going mad for that. So anybody watching that would be thinking, right, whatever you do, just do something exciting, even if it's just chucking your jacket off or just throw some shapes. It's no good just going on and just doing your song and getting off again. So even Sade's getting without that very sort of slow and lullful set, she's got a few rock tricks up her sleeve as well.
1607. Brian Ferry trots onto the boards looking as spruce and dapper as ever and proceeds to wake up a doze in Wembley with his newly formed backing band, which appears to consist of about 7 million musicians, one of which was David Gilmour of the Pink Floyd, which I wasn't aware of at the time. But yeah, Brian Ferry's set, I think, was another kind of great missed opportunity. At the time, I loved it. I hadn't heard his new album. I knew Slave to Love, he did that. But he also did 2 rather gloomy songs from his latest album that day that kind of, when you look back on it now, it just sort of flattens the atmosphere a little bit. And when you think of all the songs that he kind of got at his disposal and what he could have done and how it could have actually transformed his career a little bit. So it's a discussion that I've had with fellow Brian Ferry and Roxy Music fans over the years, and it crops up from time to time. So I posted that discussion once again yesterday on Facebook, just to get the opinion of people, because I've got my thoughts about what he should have done. I just thought it'd be interesting to see what other people thought. Now, I think, had he gone on and done Slave to Love, fair enough, recent hit, got in the top 10, great tune, it's from his new album, ticks all the boxes there. Jealous Guy, which he did do, #1 song, everybody knows it, everybody can whistle along like Nick Kershaw wanted them to do, great. But then the other 2 songs, if only he'd done something like Dance Away and Let's Stick Together, and I think it would have given his career quite a big boost. As it is, he sort of floundered for many years, from the mid-80s to the late 90s, just sort of drifting about, just and being Brian Ferry.
Well, it gives the lie to that thing that Geldof insisted that he told all the bands you must play the hits.
Yeah.
Wasn't a few technical problems as well with it?
Oh, yeah, apparently the drummer broke the skin on his snare drum with the first hit. Dave Gilmour's guitar wasn't working for the first song. Brian Ferry's mic conked out, so ended up being given 2 mics. I don't know why they gave him 2 mics if one wasn't working. Yeah. Why didn't they just give him one that was working? So for his set, he's kind of singing into 2 microphones and just sort of just sort of drifting about the stage and stuff. But on that Facebook discussion, my friend Chris, massive Roxy and Ferry fan, said, well, he didn't do his sales any harm. But if you look at the album charts over the next few weeks, there must be at least half a dozen, maybe even up to 8 or 10 acts whose albums all subsequently went up in the weeks after Live Aid. Now, Ferry's album did eventually go back up in October, but it took a long while. Whilst it didn't have any negative effects on his sales figures, it didn't have any positive ones either. It didn't catapult him into the charts like U2 and Queen and Madonna. But my friend Jocelyn was actually at Wembley on that day, and she said, I was there and Ferry's set bombed more than most acts. He saw it as an opportunity to launch his new album and be showcased across the US. Massive faux pas. The savvy artists made the most of their limited time slot. Queen were phenomenal, and I didn't even like Queen. So that's what my friend Jocelyn says about that. Now, Tim, you were saying that Paul Young hadn't played a big venue like that before, but it doesn't really show in his performance. I remember that. I haven't watched it for a long time, but I remember it from the day as being quite impressive. Paul Young's quite a tall fella. He got his mullet going on and giving it all his soul boy thing. I thought he came across really well.
Yeah, he's certainly going for it. Like you say, it doesn't show. I suppose he's still, in a sense, performing what you would normally do in front of the Manchester Apollo rather than Wembley. Whether that reaches to the back of the venue or not, I don't know. But he was probably one of the biggest stars at the time in terms of pop, and he was at his absolute peak. So, yeah, he's going for it. He made the best of it, didn't he? The other thing that reminds me of as well is that the narrative, if we can be a bit enemy for a bit, the narrative about Live Aid is that it heralded the new era of rockism and a return to retro rock, and the old guard came fighting back to get rid of all the this pop filth that we've been throwing at the kids. But actually, if you look at the lineup, then the reason I was excited about it when I was watching it at the time was there are all the pop stars du jour. There's Duran, there's Spandau, there's Howard Jones, there's Nick Kershaw, there's Paul Young. These are all the people that have been on the cover of Smash Hits, and we were looking forward to seeing them. So it was a mixture of the two. The idea that was the end of pop is a bit of a fallacy, albeit Howard Jones probably his last huge hurrah, and we didn't hear a huge amount from poor old Nick Kershaw after the riddle. But that's just pop. It's a pop concert.
Tim mentioned the NME there, and it reminded me. I dug out this old issue of Word from 2004, and it's like a Live Aid special. Obviously, Mark, Ellen, and Dave Hepworth were part of the Word, and they were very involved on the day. So there's a big special, and there's a little article by Paul Denoyer, who at the time was working for the NME, and you were just talking about the NME, and I read his little piece. It was quite interesting. It was the last, so him going to Wembley to do a report on Live Aid was the last piece he filed for them. And this is quite interesting. So the last few paragraphs, he says, the following week, the NME carried my report. On the cover was one of David Bailey's stark black and white photos of an afflicted African child. I thought that was a brave sort of gesture for a music paper, though the motive might have been a self-righteous way of denying more publicity to the pop stars. At any rate, the rest of the coverage was grudging. I was given a single page. The same space went to an anti-capitalist critique of overseas aid, and a third page went to a journalist who simply watched the show on TV. His stern verdict? I didn't like what I saw. On some intuitive level, I think the people at the NME disliked Live Aid because it symbolised the death of rock as a rebel subculture. Our music belonged to Fleet Street now, to children and to pensioners, even to the royal family. It believed in good causes, not in the apocalypse. It surrendered its leather jackets for some nice casual togs, and became not a way of life, but one more consumer choice. A part of me could mourn that too. Rock and roll mattered, but as those terrifying images of dying babies showed us, some things mattered even more.
Powerful stuff.
It is powerful stuff, yeah.
Yeah, he was saying that the NME beforehand had been quite sniffy about it because it was, at that time, they were sort of quite left-wing and generally not in favour of charity, much like the Redskins, who we'll come on to later, I'm sure. But they were coming from a similar kind of political position. And, just interesting, the amount of coverage, comparing the coverage that was in Smash Hits a very short time later, where they gave pages and pages and pages for the event, and the fact that Paul Denoyer was there and got a single page, and that was it. And then the other page was a critique of it. So, yeah.
But to be fair, there are little voices of dissent, even in addition to Smash Hits, aren't there? And obviously they're 100% behind it. But
yeah,
again, like I say, we're going to read about the Redskins later, and they're not afraid to sort of put the other argument. So it's good that that's there, isn't it? Because let's not get into the political ramifications of the whole thing because it's shaky ground. But they do at least acknowledge that. And I think there was quite a few people came out and said, yeah, actually, no, we're not. This isn't quite the right solution.
Yeah, Huey Lewis and the News were one of the doubters, believe it or not.
Yeah, he pulled out and he didn't like the whole. I can't remember the quote, but yeah, he was pretty matter of fact about it. He didn't think charity was the right answer to this. Huey Lewis and the News, kids.
Yeah, and he said we don't know where the money's going, whether it's going to go to the right people. I don't think this is the right way to be dealing with it. Yeah. Well, after we've heard from someone who was at the NME, let's get the view from its main rival, Melody Maker. Future Smash Hits editor and previous guest on the carousel, Barry McIlheney, was the Makers' man on the ground at Wembley that day.
I would probably have been 24, 25, and most of the other members of the Melody Maker staff. I was the junior cub new boy. Most of them would have been in their early 30s, mid 30s, married, some of them. Some of them would even have had children. So when they were looking for somebody to go to Wembley Stadium on a Saturday, on what was forecast to be a very hot day, there was nobody that interested. They would much rather have, stayed at home. Whereas for me, I was only 2 years out of Belfast, having been working in the public library system. So the idea of going and sitting in the sunshine watching Adam and the Ants and maybe the Style Council and whoever else might be promised was a very attractive idea, and I had nothing else to do. I didn't do it my own, I should say. I was with the late, great Carol Clerk. Funnily enough, Carol was from Belfast as well. So weirdly enough, you have these two people from Belfast, both working in the Melody Maker. So off I went with no real sense of expectation that this is going to be history in the making. And I do remember, getting there and it's very hot and just thinking, God, it's actually starting to realise it's quite a big deal, And of course, you had that memorable, brilliant opening 10 minutes when the Quo come on and do Rockin' All Over the World, which is just so perfect. I mean, I wouldn't say there are that many Status Quo fans there. I wouldn't classify myself as a member of the Quo army, but everybody likes that song and everybody likes 3 minutes of Status Quo. And off we go from there, and of course it starts to become incredibly exciting. To some extent, whilst it was brilliant to have been there and to be able to say, I mean, now it's like having been at the Great Exhibition or something, of 1951. But although that was thrilling, you also realise, and this has become even truer over the years with other events, that actually watching it on TV has its advantages, because you were able to see the context and the Geldof's Hepworth contretemps and the famous, very moving clip from Africa and Billy Connolly crying and the act, the sense of a global jukebox and the world watching. You didn't really get that. I was just more, I'm at Wembley and there's a gig on. And it was hard to comprehend the scale of it, even while you were there. It was only really over the next few days that it became apparent. I think my favourite bits were probably Bowie, obviously. U2. I mean, it's gone down in history, hasn't it? It was the moment that U2 arrived. And of course, I would spend some time in the U2 camp back in those days because I knew them from Belfast and Dublin, and I interviewed them a number of times. And in the U2 camp, they felt it had been a disaster because they had done that sort of 12-minute version of Bad. Bono got carried away, as he tends to do, They were an emerging act at that point, but I think that was the point at which they really crossed over. So I've loved U2. George Michael, I always loved George Michael, which was probably a prelude to my smash hits period. And he just felt like a class above, his vocals and the way he did it. And of course, Queen. I just remember thinking, wow, I didn't realise I liked Queen so much. Because Queen has now become history from the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, although slightly exaggerated, I'm sure. Really worked at it, and had the greatest hits down to a 13-minute fine art. And I don't know if everyone else did that. Everybody else had looked a little bit more sort of slapdash and, they had to play their latest hit, Nobody wants to hear your latest hit. They want to hear the classics, It was an interesting collision because you had acts that Melody Maker would have been very keen on putting on their cover. U2. Bowie, although Bowie was going through a strange career patch at the time, sort of post Let's Dance, pre-Tin Machine. You wouldn't have had Wham, you wouldn't have had Spandau, you wouldn't have Duran Duran. I mean, it was probably more of a smash hits lineup than a Melody Maker lineup. But because of the scale of the event, you couldn't have not put it on the cover. Whatever magazine you were, whatever your natural constituency was, there were enough acts that your audience did love, like Dylan or whoever, for people to want to know what had happened. You would have looked insane if you just sort of had pretended it hadn't happened. But Carolyn and I, on the logistics of it, there's a Saturday, the Melody Maker comes out on a Tuesday. You can't come out the following Tuesday, it's too late. So, of course, there's no internet, there's no instant phone. So if you're out on a Tuesday, you're going to have the first along with the NME, big kind of in-depth magazine account of this historic day. But if you're not leaving Wembley Stadium till midnight on the Saturday night, and you're going to be in the shops on a Tuesday, you've got a very narrow window. And my memory of it is that Carol and I think we went straight to Carol's house, and fueled by coffee and other maybe slightly less legal substances and alcohol, we somehow or other managed, hey, I was a young man at the time. And I think it was at that point we started to realise something very special was going on here. It became apparent that this was way more than just a bunch of acts on a stage. That it had been the largest television audience in the world ever, whatever. And it changed music, I think, forever. I think, there's almost a dividing line, before Live Aid, after it. For stadium bands, the likes of U2, Queen, it brought back into the public eye, sort of kept Geldof going for years afterwards. And as well as Live Aid being an amazing, historical moment in the history of the world, on a very, very micro, selfish scale, for me also, it was a big thing because Carol and I did this 8-page special. Because I was under 25, I was eligible for the PPA, which is the magazine industry body, Young Journalist of the Year feature award or something, which I won. And it was the first thing I'd ever won, and I was kind of astonished to have won it. It probably flagged up to that industry that I was this emerging writer. And of course, within a year of Live Aid, I'd gone to become editor of Smash Hits. But yeah, I have incredibly fond memories of it, and sad memories too, because Carol passed away a number of years ago, and obviously there are other people, who were there and who are no longer with us, George Michael, etc. But it's a moment in history, and one I will never forget.
1701.
Philadelphia.
Bob Geldof says something like, welcome to Wembley and the world, Philadelphia. Well, they've been going for a few hours already, but the first act that we saw from Philadelphia was Bryan Adams. And I think a very apposite song for kicking off what we saw of the American end with Everywhere I Go, the Kids Wanna Rock, which absolutely sums up the American end of Live Aid. And this is only something that's kind of struck me recently, is that whereas the UK end was a pop show with some rock legends who were kind of more pop rock legends, the American end was very rock. We've already mentioned George Thorogood and the Destroyers, but also Santana, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, REO Speedwagon.
Speedwagon,
people like that. So most of them were kind of on after 10 o'clock, after the Wembley end had finished. So what we got whilst Wembley was still happening, the Pretenders, Simple Minds, Madonna, that was good solid pop stuff. But you can see that Madonna's not going down particularly well. She's getting a lot of booing. And it's a 90,000 strong crowd in Philadelphia at the JFK Stadium there. And they just want their rock. And looking back on it now, like I said, I've watched those last few hours of Live Aid, and it's like, oh, God, this is so tiresome. This is so dull. Give me the pop music.
It looks really shabby as well, compared for some reason. If you see when they do the aerial shot as well, you can see the freeway and all the cars behind it, and it just looks sort of dirty and shabby and a bit cheap, like they just threw it together. I was watching back the documentary. There's a documentary about it, I think for the 20th anniversary or the 25th. And it's really good. It's the two-parter, and they interview pretty much everybody, including David and Paul McCartney and everyone. And there's the politics and the troubles that were going on in the background of the American leg. Bill Graham was just being a total nuisance and threatening to sue everybody. Everybody else was threatening to sue everybody else. There was a big tussle between USA for Africa, which saw themselves as a sort of separate entity to Band Aid and Live Aid, which is one of the reasons why a lot of the big acts, particularly the big black American acts, are not on at Philadelphia, because I think they'd sort of en masse said, nah, we're not happy with the politics around this and being told what to do by someone out of the Boomtown Rats. Could have been very different. And there's a whole, we'll talk later about who should have been there, but boy, if Prince and Michael Jackson had been on, well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Bill Graham had some sort of like deal or arrangement with Black Sabbath or somebody, and that's why they ended up on the bill. So there was a lot of kind of back scratching and internal things and reasons as to why the people who ended up on the American bill ended up there. Yeah, and maybe that was the right show for America. I don't know. You know, I wasn't an American teenager, and maybe they remember it differently and saw the UK end as a load of kind of like namby-pamby Brits playing their wimpy pop music or whatever. Whereas we get the American end, and it's all a load of like guitar chewing blokes, kind of like playing rock. I've nothing against a lot of the bands, you know. I own records by some of those artists that played, but when it all kind of lands together in one lump, it's just a bit too much to take, you know.
So, back in 1983, one of the presenters of Live Aid actually drove me to my wedding. Andy Kershaw, I knew from college days, obviously was one of the presenters, and it features greatly in his autobiography the various people he had to interview, and he hadn't a clue who they were. I watched most of it. In fact, I actually recorded the whole thing on 16 hours of VHS videotape, which I've never watched. I think it's one of those things you wanted to be there, but obviously with 2 children, and it was down in London, there's no way I could have been there.
So what were you doing on the day of Live Aid?
I was there.
No way. Oh,
yeah.
What happened?
Well, it was actually a friend of my mum's who's won a competition to guess the number of balloons in the back of a car, and she won 2 tickets, and she didn't want to go and said, "Oh, your daughter's into pop music. Would she like to go?" So me and a school friend went. My mum and dad drove us down. They had a day in London, and we went to the concert. I was into Howard Jones at the time, embarrassingly, so I was impressed to see him, and starting to get into David Bowie, and he was absolutely fantastic. Queen, I reckon, stole the show. They were amazing. I could see where I was sat on the other side of the arena. I could see Princess Di dancing away. Can't remember much else because it was a long time ago now, but that was my first big concert. You know, I was only 15 at the time, so it was probably quite daunting walking into an arena that big.
So there's pop kids Stephen Green and Jill Turner with their memories of the day, although I think Stephen was a pop grown-up rather than a kid, and how lucky was Jill. We move on now to one of the most remembered performances of the day, and that's U2. Shunday Bloody Shunday, as Bono says as he comes on stage. Now, I bought the Under a Blood Red Sky live album off the back of seeing them on here. I'd already got a couple of the singles, but after seeing them on this, I was like, wow, these are amazing. I've got to get these. But the band thought that they'd absolutely bombed on the day because Bono disappeared off stage for 15 minutes whilst the rest of the band was sort of like, well, we'll just keep doing this backing track. And it turns out Bono's, you know, having a bit of a smooch with some, or Tong Sani, as it says in Smash Hits, with some of the female attendees of Live Aid. But it turns out to be, as it says at the end of the thing here, summing up U2, they take their leave after the most uplifting performance of the day.
Wow. I'm really pleased also, regular listeners to this podcast will be pleased to see at 1721 the mention of Shimmering Shards of Sepulchral Majesty. Yay!
Beautiful.
I mean, at the time, I liked U2, but then I think watching that just took my passion for them to a new level. And like you, I was really struck by them. I mean, I watched Bad again today for the first time in years, and it's still actually, I found it quite emotional watching it, and it still had a power. And I thought, before I watched it, I thought I'm just going to be like rolling my eyes at this, because it's easy to dismiss Bono, and because he certainly wasn't a stranger to a little bit of pomposity, shall we say, but that gesture of going down into the audience and really trying to make that connection, it was a powerful thing. And again, it wasn't something, I mean, maybe you'd seen Bruce do it. I guess maybe that's where the inspiration had come from, because I think Bruce had been doing that for a few years by that time, hadn't he? But still doing that live on TV and ballsing things up to that degree in a way, because they were due to play Pride, weren't they? And they didn't because they'd overrun, so they had to kind of cut it short. But to me, it's still a really powerful moment, and it's still it's pretty much the main image I have. Well, the two main images are, it's that, isn't it? Bono going down into the crowd and Freddie Mercury with his arm in the air and his little mic stand thing, you know. But it really kind of sums it up, and it was that connection with the audience that really made it special.
Well, I think he'd already got form, Bobo, for clambering over amps and sort of hoisting himself around in the crowd at this point. So I think it's sort of thing. It's kind of thing he was used to doing something spontaneous, which I think is why the band are geared up to just keep the groove going, you know, while he does his thing. Also, if you watch it back, there are people with extra long mic leads, almost as if they knew that he might be tempted to wander off. But I don't think they realised quite how far he was going to go, and I don't think he realised quite how far he was going to have to jump down into the muddy pit where he ends up. It is good, isn't it? I think the one thing I got from that, which stuck with me, and I did sort of get into U2, I have to admit it, after that performance, and they were one of the first bands that I became a bit of a collectible, you know, wanted to get all the singles of, right? But I don't think it was necessarily the sort of him Christ-like beckoning the children to come unto him at the lip of the stage. It wasn't that stuck with me. What it was the sound of the Hedge with the Echoplex effect on the guitar doing that riff, and the rest of the band just locking in. And unbeknownst to me, I just heard basically krautrock, and they knew how to just keep a solid riff going and just go with it. And it's like, all right, it's basically Noi and Can happening whilst Bono's doing his dancing, which obviously later on, I was disappointed when I heard the actual album version that it sort of cuts off. It doesn't go. I expected it to go on for 15 minutes. I was waiting for this riff to come in and we could just, you know, zone out with the Hedge. So, so I think that's what I really liked about it, was to hear a band just playing a riff and playing one note for, 10 minutes was great. So, but obviously that wasn't the intention. But thank you, The Hedge.
Something that really made me laugh watching it as well is a bit just before he goes down, before he jumps off the stage bit, he kind of crouches on the monitor and almost goes ass over tea, doesn't he? He kneels and he almost goes and he just catches himself, because if he'd have fallen, head first out, I don't think he'd have ever got up again, because it was like about a 6 foot jump, It was really funny. He's trying to spread his legs in tight leather trousers. It's not a good look, but yeah. Very sweaty in that frock coat with his mullet as well.
Hello, my name is Peter Fitzpatrick. I am on Twitter as Circuit 3 Music. I make synth pop music. On Live Aid Day, I was almost 19. I was 19 the following month. And I was in Wembley, even though I'm from Dublin and was, of course, living in Dublin at the time. I saw the notice for the gig, and that was it. I took a day off work. They didn't believe I was going. I had to show them the ticket. And I travelled over on the ferry from Dublin to Holyhead in Wales. We then were put onto coaches all the way down to London. My first time in London. Travelled on my own. Brilliant experience. And I tagged along with a couple of fellas who'd been to London before and knew how to get around on the tube. We walked into the stadium just as the Royal Guard were doing the salute thing, and just as Status Quo came on, I was walking down across the pitch and making my way up as far as I could. Because I was on my own, I didn't have to worry about anybody else, and made my way up as close as I could to the front. And it was an amazing day. I remember every minute. There wasn't a single artist I didn't want to see. It was the perfect gig for this 18-year-old, soon-to-be 19-year-old young man. My abiding memories of the day, there's a few. The first one, I think, was early on in the day when the Boomtown Rats came on and Bob Geldof was there. And I think you have to understand that growing up in Ireland in the 70s and into the 80s, it was a difficult place to be because the economy was a complete basket case. There really weren't opportunities. And we just had mass emigration. And the younger people living in the country, and it was a very young country, we didn't have anything to hold on to and to say we were proud of. We just didn't. Everything was second hand. It came from the UK. It came from America. And Geldof I remember shouting out loud something about Geldof or something because I wanted people to know I'm from the same town as this fella. That was the first time I felt proud to be where I was from, because there really wasn't anything else. And the reception that U2 got really took me by surprise. We'd heard stories that they were big, you know, and they were doing things in colleges in America, doing that circuit, and they were big in the UK, but that really took me by surprise. So I think the Irish thing for me was the first big surprise and the first big memory. I think the memory that everybody who was there will talk about is, of course, Queen. I vividly remember the sea of hands during Radio Gaga. My hands are up there with everybody else's. It was phenomenal. And of course, when McCartney came out, that was something else. I got to see a live Beatle. I recall David Bowie being phenomenal, and I was going through a Bowie kick at the time. I was devouring everything. And one of the first things I did when I got back to Dublin on my next paycheck, I went out, I tried to buy a suit like the one Bowie wore that day. And of course, you know, I got something that was sort of like it. And I thought I looked the dogs. I probably did. I probably looked like a dog's dinner, because nobody could do Bowie. But he was effortlessly cool, wasn't he? So I don't think there was a duff act in the entire day. So a couple of other memories, things that people probably don't realise happened while we were in Wembley Stadium. So a teddy bear was being tossed from one end of Wembley Stadium to the other. It made its way from the very front where the stage was and was tossed up in the air and was kept up in the air all the way to the back of Wembley and all the way back up again. You didn't see that on TV. There was a streaker. So as we were facing the stage, to our left, which was opposite where the royal box was, somewhere, at some point during the day, some very, I don't know, extrovert individual decided he would stand up stark bollock naked on his seat in the stand and just wave to the crowd, and he got a resounding wave of applause off the stadium. It must have been between acts or something. They're great little, precious little memories of the day. A couple of years ago, I decided to see, could I get my Live Aid programme signed by as many of the artists that played. And of course, I'll never get some of them now. We've lost them. And I missed a couple of opportunities. But I've gotten quite a few, and I've met both Bob Geldof. I call him Bob because like we're that close. We met for a minute, and Bejur, who was very tolerant of me rabbiting on because I was a fan of his music and of what he did with Live Aid. They've signed the ticket, which is a really precious possession, and of course the programme. I think some of the others I've had sign it include Howard Jones. We had a great chat about the show. Thomas Dolby signed the David Bowie page for me. That was great. The one that I was, I think, most satisfied in getting was Alison Moyet's autograph. I was always a fan of Alison, and I met her before a gig in Dublin, and she very kindly said, "You don't look old enough to have been at Live Aid," and I keep that filed away because if you could see me, I'm a very balding mid-50s man. So for Alison Moyet to say I don't look old, I'll take that every day.
Going back to Smash Hits now, and 1839 back at Wembley. It's time for a bit of zany humour from funny men Griff Rhys-Jones and Mel Smith, who come out dressed as British bobbies. After a couple of not popular gags, they announce Her Majesty, Queen. And onto stage centre prances Freddie Mercury in skimpy white vest and tight jeans. The roar from the crowd is huge, reaching an alarming crescendo as Freddie starts to tickle the ivories and sing the opening lines to that hoary old chestnut Bohemian Rhapsody. Just about everybody seems to be wigging out to Queen. Who'd have thought it? And I know we still talk about this set to this day. It's been immortalised in the Bohemian Rhapsody film, move for move. Even a cameo from a David Hepworth clone who looks more like Timmy Mallet, but less said about that, the better. But it was an absolutely riveting and revelatory performance that was just like unlike anything else that we'd seen that day, Queen did their final world, well, we didn't know it was going to be the final world tour, but their final world tour the next year, where they were able to sell out Wembley Stadium. And I think it was purely on the back of this performance that they were able to just go out and play to, in some places in South America, over 100,000 people in one venue. And Freddie Mercury was just absolutely at home doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the Live Aid performance just raised them up another couple of rungs, didn't it? I mean, they were already kind of rock and roll royalty, but they kind of went stratospheric after that, didn't they?
Well, it's in the name, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
I think it's just as well, it's for the career of Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones that the set was so good, and we could all forget that absolutely terrible gag. Ladies, here they are, Her Majesty Queen. It doesn't even work, does it?
No.
That's a really terrible gag, isn't it? Now, never put comedians on at big rock concerts, as Ricky Gervais will testify. But it was a big deal. I probably wasn't really a fan of Queen at the time, and I don't remember them sort of being at a low ebb. I thought they were a big deal. They'd had a couple of recent really big hits, and kids at school like Queen. They were one of the older bands that I think younger lads and girls were still into. But yeah, you can't really argue. I remember the Radio Gaga bit. It's game over, isn't it? The winner is Sir Frederick, Lord Lucan of Mercury, isn't it?
Yeah. It still amazes me to this day that the whole of Wembley just knew what to do in Radio Gaga and then repeated it for We Will Rock You. Straight on cue. There they all are, just clapping along.
And the fact that they then, Freddie and Brian May came back later on and did that dreadful acoustic number, they transcended that because everyone seems to forget that bit as well.
Yeah.
Is this the world we created or something? It's mentioned here, isn't it?
Yeah, mic problems ahoy. Yeah, it was just absolutely drenched in feedback, and the sound of the backstage roadies and technicians and things coming over the PA, or certainly over the broadcast anyways. And of course the same problems that scuppered Paul McCartney's appearance as well.
Meanwhile, Sir Clifford Richard is furiously banging on the doors, trying to be let in, because he wants to go off. He's been watching it all day, and he wanted to go and do an impromptu performance like it was Wimbledon or something. And of course, he does rock up on the BBC footage apparently later on about 3 a.m.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it's mentioned here that he does manage to steal his way in there, doesn't he?
And then to the, Simple Minds, they played the Philadelphia end. Again, a welcome sight, doing Don't You Forget About Me, but they also did a track from I don't know if the album had come out at that point, or no, it probably hadn't come out once upon a time. It was still probably a couple of months away, but they did Jungleland, I think, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. Also, watching the footage, they think it's all over. Someone's telling them to get off stage because they were overrunning, and somehow they caught up with themselves, and they just finished Don't You Forget About Me, and Bill Graham's at the side of the stage going, "What are you doing? Get back on!" So literally, Jim Kerr just goes, "Thank you very much, Philadelphia, good night," walks off stage, and immediately does a complete double take and goes right back on again and just goes, here's a song call, and he launches into Promise You a Miracle, I think it is. Yeah, so they come back on. It's the shortest encore in history.
And then Dame David Bowie graces the stage of Wembley, the one that I was waiting for. And asked me then, who was the best person at Live Aid? And I would have said David Bowie, even though I knew I was lying to myself when it was really Queen. But I thought David Bowie's set was great. He's got Thomas Dolby on keyboards and a big chunk of Prefab Sprout backing him as well. And he doesn't necessarily do his biggest hits. TVC15 just kind of scraped into the top 40 back in 76. Heroes wasn't even a big hit back in 77, but somehow seemed to fit the day. And more recent one with Modern Love, and he also did Rebel Rebel. But he was one of the performers who was used to playing in front of big crowds. And even though he was probably bricking it like many people were, it doesn't show. He comes out and he absolutely nails it. And if Queen hadn't been on, I think Bowie's set would have been the best of the day.
It is really good. Like I say, yeah, I don't remember being that bothered that I didn't know the songs. And also, I don't think anybody in 1985 was desperate to hear tracks from Ziggy Stardust or, Aladdin Sane. I think he'd already got his act honed by then. They wanted to see 80s Bowie. The best bit, though, because he cuts the set short, I think he was going to do 5 years, which would have been a bit weird. And he doesn't do it, and he's already agreed to cut the set short so that they can show the Cars video. But as he's walking along, he says, "This is what the day's all about. Please send your money in." in that perfect Bowie way. It's just a lovely way to sign off. And obviously off he goes, puts his jacket on, and everybody starts crying and watching the Cars video.
Yeah, and where apparently more donations came in after that video than at any point during the day.
Yeah, well, this is after. So Geldof did the table thumping, fuck the address bit with Hepworth, I think just after Queen, because he'd seen that going down a storm and he'd seen the money coming in it, and it was $1 million or something, which is a lot of money in 1985, but it's not as much as he was expecting to get. So he's up in the gallery with David Hepworth, Billy Connolly, Pamela Stevenson, and Ian Astbury from The Cult, who is trying to discreetly puff away on what I assume is a regular cigarette. And we get the no, fuck the address, which obviously everyone then subsequently translates as give us your fucking money, which he obviously never said. Interestingly, particularly bearing in mind that the senior editor of Smash Hits is sat next to him and is the subject of the F word, no mention of it in this report. So maybe it wasn't seen as either they just forgot in the rush, or he just said, "Oh, let's just draw a line under that," or it didn't seem that big a deal. I remember it though.
Hello, Giddy Carousel of Pop. My name is Richard, and in 1985, during Live Aid, I was 18 and I was selling TVs and hi-fis and stereos and all kinds of things at British home stores in Romford in Essex. My abiding memory of the day was being able to watch it while I was working, which was a bit of a luxury. So in terms of looking back on it now, I've got a videotape because although I couldn't sit in and watch it, I saw most of it up until the point that I clocked off at about sort of 6-7 o'clock in the evening on that Saturday. I did get my mate Adam Poulton to do a VHS tape of bands that I wanted to be recorded. I've still got the tape, bizarrely, and it's a who's of 80s in terms of who I was liking. So I've got Ultravox on there. I wanted to record Bowie, Howard Jones. I managed to get taped, McCartney, because my mate Adam was a massive McCartney fan and insisted that I had that on the tape. I've got all of the U2 performance. I think I've got Spandau Ballet. My current girlfriend went with her brother to Live Aid. My girlfriend's probably got a far more interesting story about it than I have, as she was there. And two things that she remembers is firstly that where she was stood, and it was a baking hot day, if you remember. She came away from the day with a suntan down one side of her face. And secondly, that she has still got a spare ticket because she bought 6 tickets for the event and could only get 5 people to go. So she still has, to this day, a spare ticket for Live Aid. Anyway, that's my recollections. Thanks so much for the podcast. It's bloody awesome. Take care. Lots of love. Bye.
So Elton John, his set was plagued by feedback and stuff, but I think he pulls a master stroke by getting Kiki D on to do Don't Go Breaking My Heart, and then a fantastic climax brings out George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley. I think if he gets to introduce Andrew Ridgeley, he just sort of like goes and stands at the back and pretends to do some backing vocals. But George Michael singing Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, which is, looking back at it now, I haven't seen that for a long, long time. An absolute highlight of the day, I think. I wasn't, my sister liked Wham and George Michael. That was her thing, and it wasn't necessarily mine to like. It was mine to scoff at. I liked proper music, and Wham weren't proper music. But looking back now, I can absolutely see that George Michael was just, absolutely brilliant on those few minutes that he got on stage. After Elton John, we get Madonna from JFK. And then the climax at Wembley, Freddie Mercury and Brian May doing a little song that nobody can hear. Paul McCartney doing a little song that nobody can hear. And then I think Bob Geldof has the right attitude when the assembled masses troop onto the stage and sing Do They Know It's Christmas, when he says, if we're going to cock it up, we might as well cock it up with all the world watching. Whereas you compare that with the finale at Philadelphia, and it's about an 8-minute version of We Are the World, and they're trying to be really slick and professional, but mics aren't switched on. You can't hear Harry Belafonte. People don't know whether they should be singing their lines. Patti LaBelle just sings over the top of absolutely everyone, doesn't leave any space whatsoever. I mean, every charity concert with a big sing-along at the end needed someone to do some improvising and ad-libbing, and Patti LaBelle was the woman for that at Philadelphia. It was Alison Moyet in Wembley at our end of Live Aid. But not content with bringing out all these stars in Philadelphia, they bring on a children's choir as well, who you can't hear.
That's just a step too far, isn't it?
And it's just like, oh, stop it. You could have just done, a couple of choruses and that would have been fine. Not just one more time. Let's do that again. Yeah, let's not. It's not sounding good. It's not as good a song as Do They Know It's Christmas? Let's leave it there. Good night, Philadelphia.
No, I think you're right. That sort of slightly shambolic ending was a perfect way of doing it, really, because there was a nice kind of humanity to it, and it didn't feel over choreographed or over scripted, and it wasn't all shiny. It was a bit ramshackle and very British, really.
No, it's great. It was any way they could do it. It's not Christmas, but we're going to sing. We're going to sing "Do They Know It's Christmas." I get really worried when I watch it back when Pete Townsend and Paul McCartney hoist Bob Geldof aloft on their shoulders, because apparently his back had got. Obviously, poor guy's not slept for days on end. And he's running around organising everything backstage, and I think his back had gone at some point in the afternoon. By that point, I think he's just running on pure adrenaline, so he probably didn't feel a thing. But I bet that boy was sore when he got up in the morning, having spent several hours in the club, the Legends, and all been to Legends to do that. There's a brilliant little Smash Hits little gag in here somewhere that kind of sums up the sort of vibe at the end of the night, and it just says, 3:06 a.m. Clodagh Rogers wins the Eurovision Song Contest at the second attempt with Jack in the Box. Oops. Oh, no, sorry. Forget that bit.
We jump back an hour earlier, and back in London, a young acoustic guitar strumming singer makes an impromptu appearance on the BBC broadcast, and upstage is Duran Duran, and just about everyone else for that matter. His name, of course, is Sir Clifford Cliff Richard. And he does turn up. He'd been doing a gig somewhere else in the country, and then came straight from there down to the nightclub in the West End to treat whoever was there, Sue Pollard and David Essex, to his heartfelt song about Live Aid.
Oh, lovely. And also, if you do get a chance, if you do watch that, the fantastic 2-part documentary about this, it's really impressive, just the number of people they've got in it. But there's 2 female special constables in it who are being interviewed about their day. And there's a bit where they say, and there was a point where these 2 fellas came over and said, excuse me, we're in dire straits. We need to get our equipment across to the other venue, because Dire Straits, immediately after their set, were running over to Wembley Arena to do a gig of their own, because they were already doing 2 gigs that night. And these 2 special constables are just would say, oh yeah, we'll help you out. And they went over to security and went, excuse me, these gentlemen are in dire straits and they need to get across the other venue, thinking they meant Dire Straits, not...
They're in a bit of bother.
So, yeah.
My name is Faizan Fiaz, and in 1985 I was 13 years old. I was living with my mum and my dad in East London with my siblings. I went to mostly Asian girls' school. Pop music, British pop music, or pop music generally, wasn't that popular at my school. Because most of us were South Asian, Bollywood was huge. But for me, in a sort of my minor act of rebellion, I kind of turned my back on Bollywood back then and put all of my focus onto pop music, and especially Duran Duran, who were my absolute favourite, and was really thrilled to find out that they would be performing on the Philadelphia side of the Live Aid concert. So my memories of that day were, I had made some plans to record the entire thing, because we had a video recorder. Not everyone had a video in the 80s, but being a South Asian family, we definitely had one, because all Asian families had a video recorder. It was the only way that our families could keep in touch with South Asian culture through Bollywood films, etc., etc. And was it Status Quo that started? I can't remember. It feels like they did. I mean, Status Quo were always a bit of a joke band, but no one seemed to care. There was like no coolness that day. It was like whatever band you liked or you didn't like, everyone seemed to be on an equal footing. And I think the first exciting performer for me was David Bowie. And that was just an electrifying performance. I think he was, I mean, Bowie had lots of peaks in his career, and that was definitely a peak. His outfit was incredible. You know, he looked totally cool, totally at ease. I mean, it was a huge concert. I mean, the size was palpable. I think everyone, even watching it, could sense, the scale of it. But he totally took it in his stride. I mean, you could totally see he was enjoying it, and the audience were enjoying it. We were certainly enjoying it back home too. U2, the famous, instrumental that went on, Bono suddenly leaps off the stage, and it was really melodramatic, wasn't it? Because it was, oh boy, I can just picture it now. He jumps off the stage and he's sort of like baying into the crowd. He's kind of like reaching out into the crowd, and then suddenly like your focus comes towards, who he's reaching out to. And it's this brown girl who's being squished in the crush at Wembley Stadium. And he's calling out to the security guards to pull her out. She gets pulled out and she's all kind of weeping and crying, and he brings her onto the stage and then he dances with her. And it was just this really kind of over the top, melodramatic, really 80s kind of moment. For me, who was still a pop fan in 85, of course, though, Duran Duran were the band that I was waiting for, and they performed in Philadelphia, I remember. So I had to stay up till quite late to watch them. It wasn't their best performance that I had seen. They were very sweaty. It was a very hot, sweaty day. I remember everyone had their sort of eyeliner dripping, it looked like, on stage. And the band looked quite kind of not very united. I read subsequently in biographies about Duran Duran that they weren't getting along at that point. They had split into Arcadia and they'd split into the Power Station, two separate bands. It's like these temporary projects or whatever. And you could tell, I think, on stage at that gig at Live Aid that they weren't really together. They didn't really look like they even liked each other, to be honest with you. So it wasn't a hugely enjoyable performance to watch. But, when you're blinded by pop, fandom, it doesn't really matter, does it? I was a huge fan of Nick Rhodes, so that I was happy to watch him. So nobody in my house got to watch TV that day except me, because we had obviously just one TV. It's not like, these days where everyone's got their own device or, TV to watch whatever they wanted to do. It was one TV, one video. Nobody got to watch anything except Live Aid that day at our house in East London.
In terms of who should have been there, who should have played, who was missing, who would you have liked to have seen that wasn't there?
I think at the time I would have liked to see The Cure there. They would have been good. Doing a bit of Love Cats and In Between Days and the like. They were a good pop band. I'm trying to think who else would have been. I would have expected to see.
China Crisis.
Madness would have been good.
Madness, yeah, of course. Well, I think, had they split up by then?
No, they were still hanging on. I don't think things were great at that point, but they were still together.
Well, the biggest group of just the few months preceding, Frankie.
Of course.
They were the biggest thing going. And the other one, of course, and I think he was on the cards, and, I think he was perhaps not in the best of state to be on stage, was Boy George in Culture Club.
For me, there isn't anybody that I would have wanted to see on the day that I thought, why weren't they playing or anything like that. But looking back, it does kind of seem odd that Bruce Springsteen wasn't there and Prince wasn't there and Michael Jackson. But there is kind of like, there's a lot of false memory syndrome around Live Aid and about who played and what people remember seeing. And I know a lot of people do think that Bruce Springsteen played at one end or the other. And in fact, he had played at Wembley just a few nights before, because some of the staging that was used for Live Aid was actually part of what had been set up for his shows. but Bruce did not play. But one of our listeners did actually send in something about this kind of thing. Paul Margach, he says, I saw tiny bits and pieces of it with my mom, but I don't remember much. She has fond memories of performances by Paul Young and U2, being especially impressed by Pride in the Name of Love. Only trouble is, they didn't play it at Live Aid. I think, Gavin, you've encountered something similar as well.
Yeah, Lynn, my wife, she was a massive Howard Jones fan at the time. She was in the fan club and she had scrapbooks on him and stuff. And we were talking about Live Aid the other day. And she was saying about who she'd enjoyed on the day because she'd watched it all on telly. And I said, you must have enjoyed Howard Jones. She was like, Howard Jones didn't play Live Aid. It's like, pretty sure he did. She had no memory of it at all. I had to find it on YouTube and... just to prove to her, and she was like, she genuinely had no idea at all he'd played Live Aid. Made a little impression, clearly.
Well, he only did one number, so if you'd just popped out for a comfort break, you'd have missed the whole of Hojo's set, wouldn't you? Also, there were, I remember this, there were rumours in the press that the Beatles were going to perform, as in Bongo and George Harrison were going to join Paul McCartney at the piano, and Julian Lennon was going to stand in for John. Didn't happen.
No, that was actually in our TV schedule as well. In the local newspaper, it said Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr and Julian Lennon.
Wow.
And it never happened. I kept waiting for that all day long. Never happened.
Can you imagine the Beatles, 3 of the Beatles back together, and the mics don't work?
Yeah. Got another message in from one of the listeners as well. Steve Fenton, I was 15 and went over the handlebars of my bike and to A&E the evening before. I watched it on telly with my broken arm in a sling whilst on drugs, although probably fewer than most of the performers.
Very good.
And former guest on the carousel from a few episodes back, Catherine Sked, she said, it's a little painful to share. I was on a Girl Guide camping weekend, so the live bit passed me by. I left very specific video recording instructions at home. Can't bring myself to talk about it. So clearly, those instructions were ignored.
There's a tale of pain and woe in there somewhere, isn't there?
Oh, Gavin can form a support group. Oh.
So you're not on your own, Gav.
You're not alone.
And we've had a lovely email from Pete Selby as well with some of his memories of the day. In parts, very similar to my Live Aid day. Here's what he wrote. I watched the first 4 to 5 hours of it upstairs in my bedroom, curtains closed to keep out the sun's glare on a portable black and white television, but with the music playing through my parents' hi-fi, which was being simultaneously broadcast on Radio 1. This blew my mind and is the only explanation I have for not watching it on the colour TV downstairs. It does surprise me that my dad, who was a huge music fan, didn't stick around to watch it with me. I recall that he was playing cricket in the afternoon for his bank. He came home about 6:30, just in time, therefore, for Queen. After this point, we watched the rest of it communally on the big telly. I didn't stay up for the rest of the Philadelphia broadcast. To be honest, whenever they cut across to the US throughout the day, it was largely full of slightly hairy men I didn't recognise or like, playing too much guitar. The Wembley show conclusion felt like the perfect end to me. The perfect end of my concert, featuring audience members who looked like my neighbours or friends' older brothers, TV comedians I knew bumbling onto the stage to act the giddy goat, and assorted Radio 1 DJs who felt like safe pairs of hands to guide me through the day. In short, and in retrospect, this very parochial, the Coldstream Guards, all hands to the pump's slightly Heath Robinson sense of occasion, all elevated its charm. And when I think about Live Aid, which I often do, and through slightly misty eyes, I realise this nostalgia is for something far bigger than just a stadium rock concert. It's a nostalgia for my broader youth, of being that 12-year-old boy, living in a small commuter town in Surrey where pop music, Smash Hits, Top of the Pops, Live Aid, was both my backbone and my escape. And so we come to the finale of this part of the podcast, which I guess makes us Paul McCartney in a way, or Bob Dylan. And as I'm sure many of you know, it just so happened that 2 members of the BBC TV presentation team for Live Aid had both been editors of Smash Hits in the first half of the 1980s. So we hand you over now to David Hepworth and Mark Ellen to share some of their memories of that day and also ponder the legacy of Live Aid.
It was no problem going into something totally unrehearsed because nothing on Whistle Test was rehearsed at all. There was no script for anything at all, so you were quite used to that. All I remember is a car, I think, picked me up and took me around to Wembley. I remember being very aware of the fact that it was a lovely day, which I still think is one of the most significant factors of the whole thing, and being delivered to Wembley and then being conducted up via a series of kind of catwalks and ladders up to the kind of Perspex box that used to be suspended in the canopy of the old Wembley Stadium, wherein usually sat the majestic figure of Des Lynam, pronouncing
Jimmy Hill, the Jimmy Hill commentary box, yeah.
Right, it was where they summarised from, wasn't it, rather than commentary. And when you did your bit at Live Aid, what they did was they wired you in. So they put your earpiece in, and it was you were connected there. You couldn't move. You were tethered. You couldn't go to the lavatory or anything like that. So if you had a 5-hour stint, like I think I did at one point, you simply couldn't move. So as ever with television, what the presenters remember is the discomfiture and the embarrassment and the, oh my God, what's going to happen next, rather than the glory that the viewer takes on board. That's really the difference.
And the terror of getting it wrong in front of all those people. I can remember a car arriving and picking up me and Andy Kershaw, who live around the corner, and Andy shouting up my bedroom window, Mark, have you got your brown trousers on? Because we were absolutely terrified. I remember going up to that commentary box. I remember the doors opening, must have been about 10 o'clock, and Dave and I and the rest of us watching the people charging in. Do you remember that, Dave? Running in with their picnic hampers to get to the front. But the thing I remember vividly was the idea that we had to kind of hype up this notion that it was going to be the biggest television event in history. And we had to believe that. We had to radiate that point to the outside world. And we started to give out information. Do you remember that it was now bigger than the Apollo 11 moonshot? Do you remember that, Dave? There are more people watching the Apollo 11 moonshot. There are more people watching than the Beatles' Our World. Now, there was no basis for that at all.
Absolutely none.
Absolutely none. At one point, one of us was required to announce that 90% of all television sets in the world are showing this programme. That's not true. I mean, even the percentage of countries that had agreed to take it were not necessarily showing it live. What they were doing was just recording bits and showing it the next day. So that actually had a very destabilising effect on the team, because we were starting to think, oh my God, the whole world is watching. This is unbelievably unnerving.
Yeah, you'd occasionally get things in your earpiece saying, before you did a link, you're like Mark said, you are now broadcasting to whatever the population of the Earth was, and you thought that is really not helpful.
No,
to be told that, not helpful one bit.
I can remember being told there was 2.3 billion people watching, and I can remember turning to the person beside me as they were counting us in 10, 9, 8, and saying, "How much is a billion? Is that 10 million, or is it 100 million? Or it doesn't matter, Oh, it's extraordinary."
Yeah, I did a stint, sort of mid-afternoon, I think, probably till early evening, with Paul Gambaccini, and we were there to kind of do the intros and to field the occasional kind of business about the appeal and all that kind of stuff. But also you were there in case anything went down, which didn't very often, but I suppose it did occasionally. There were the odd delays. And so you'd have a number of junior producers going down into the backstage area or wherever, and then re-emerging with lesser-known pop stars who hadn't been considered quite famous enough to be on the bill. But we're damned if they were going to be missed out of this thing altogether. And so you'd have a sofa which would have Andrew Ridgeley, and it would have Fish out of Marillion would be there, And
most famously, Ian Astbury of The Cult.
Well, that's what
nobody knew who he was. I think you were doing the interview. Nobody introduced him, because actually the person who brought him up didn't know who he was. He just looked like a rock star.
They put him on the sofa, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to come to this guy in a second. There's a full sofa. And I thought, who's that? And I looked at the producer, May Miller,
Yeah.
And I said...
She just went...
I just went, who's that? And she did the international gesture of puzzlement that said, I don't know. She delivered him there, and she wasn't sure who he was. And so I had to kind of take my life in my hands, and when he got to that point, and I just had to say, and now we appear to be joined by Ian Astbury of The Cult. Thinking, please, God, if you're not, go along with it. Yeah, but luckily...
Just be Ian Astbury for the day.
Yes, if you're Wayne Hussey from The Mission, just pretend, you'll look the same.
Hat on.
The average person sitting at home on Saturday afternoon watching. You were kind of cut off from the experience the crowd were having down there because you were in this Perspex box full of celebrities, whatever. And so, my memories of Live Aid are things like sitting there with Billy Connolly when the Pretenders were on stage. And the Pretenders had recently lost two members. They both died, Pete Fountain and James Honeyman Scott. And Billy Connolly looked at them and he said to me, I wouldn't join that group. And I said, why not? He says, nobody leaves.
Still kills
So it's a very, very irreverent joke, but it makes me laugh every time I think about Live Aid. I think about Billy Connolly.
One of the big moments I can remember was later on when we were at Legends. The bit I was broadcasting was at Legends with Mike Smith and various other people. And it was when Bob Dylan came on, which was the finale, wasn't it? It was Bob Dylan with Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards. And I was standing there with Bob Geldof and various people waiting. This was just everyone absolutely revved up. This is going to be so thrilling. The cherry on the cake. And Bob Dylan started his set with the least promising words I have ever heard anybody ever utter at a live performance. He came on stage, he said, I'd like to bring on Ronnie Wood and Keith Richards, but I don't know where they are. And that's what he actually said. At which point, Keith Richards comes shambling on with a cigarette in his mouth. Do you remember? The sort of weird waistcoat with only one button and no shirt on.
God, yeah.
And Ronnie Wood comes on in some kind of blouse, and they're completely out of tune. And then Dylan starts playing Hollis Brown, the Ballad of Hollis Brown, a song they had not rehearsed. I know that because I interviewed Ronnie Wood about 3 weeks later, and he said that they had rehearsed some songs, laughing, they call it rehearsal. But that wasn't one of them. So they were playing live in front of this enormous audience as the finale, a song that the two of the members of the group playing didn't recognise.
Well, didn't he famously say, wasn't he whispered to him, we're going to do Hollis Brown? And Ronnie thought, Hollis Brown?
Yeah, it's about
cough medicine.
It's a song about cough medicine.
So and you kind of have to, it's the ultimate example of how Bob Dylan, and you'll forgive me if I swear on your podcast, you can cut it out if you don't like it. Bob Dylan, I've met rock stars, and Bob Dylan is the only one I've ever met who genuinely doesn't give a fuck. And that was not giving a fuck on the biggest possible stage ever.
Yeah. They'd been in their hospitality caravans in the afternoon, plentifully stocked with booze, and had just been drinking solidly in the scorching heat since about 2:00 in the afternoon, and it looked like it. God, it was appalling, wasn't
it? Yeah. So and we just kind of got through the day like you did. You thought this is going really well, and when you thought when Queen were on and things like that, you thought, there's something happening here, because you could see the fact that with Queen that the crowd were part of the act and were part of the visual thing, part of the spectacle, and so that was quite clearly something sort of transformational. And my other memory is finally getting home about 4 a.m, and my wife sitting up in bed, not normally known for, waiting for me to tumble in from kind of some West End nightclub or whatever. And she's just sitting there going, that was something, wasn't it? And she said, I've had your mum on your phone. I've had my mum and dad on the phone. You know what I mean? That the experience of people at home was clearly very different. They'd felt more part of it, oddly enough, than we felt completely. In Wembley Stadium.
The thing that really knocked me out was I had to leave at about, I suppose must have been about 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening to go to Legends to do my bit of broadcast. And I got a cab from Wembley down to
down to the West End. And obviously, when we'd gone to Wembley in the morning, life was perfectly normal. When we came back in the middle of Live Aid, it was completely transformed. It was extraordinary. London was deserted. All you could hear anywhere was the sound of the broadcast. In the cab I was in the passing cars, from the parks that you went round where people had barbecues, from the open windows of the buildings you passed. Everybody was watching the broadcast. And that was very, very thrilling and a bit overwhelming, actually, because there we were building up this idea that this great event was taking place. And actually, it turned out it was. It had the attention of the entire nation.
Oh, yeah, it obviously, talking to people afterwards, it obviously just grew during the day. You know, that people were ringing each other up and saying, oh, have you watched this? Or turn over to BBC One or BBC Two or whatever and catch it. The following morning, I'd foolishly agreed to go to Lord's to interview Viv Richards, the great cricketer. And because who wouldn't go and meet Viv Richards, you know? And they used to do a program at the time where sports people picked a bunch of favourite videos or something. And so Viv Richards turns up in the nursery end at Lord's and looks at me and said, oh, good grief, Live Aid, you know. And they'd all been watching it. He said, I had batsmen trying to get out yesterday to get into the dressing room to watch it.
So he didn't miss Nick Kershaw.
Yeah. God knows who it would be. Yeah.
Oh, dear.
You know, so that gave you an idea of just how big a thing it was. And it's quite interesting, you know, that you think, you know, particularly in sort of pop, or even in my you know, memory, which goes back a few years, there aren't many events where you can look at them and everybody will tell you where they were that day. I mean, for my case, JFK's, you know, assassination, the Beatles' arrival in New York in 1964 or whatever. I don't think I remember much else in the 60s where you'd have that same sense of a day. And I don't remember much in the 70s that have that much sense of a day. Whereas Live Aid, you can ask people, say, where were you? And they'll tell you. They were at home or they were in a cab or God knows what, you know. And, you know, so there aren't many of those moments, and that was one of them. And I suppose its genesis was similarly a moment when Bob Geldof had seen the Michael Burke film in November?
November 84. Yeah.
The previous year. And you know, that was in the days of still a handful of television channels. And so if a thing like that had impact, it had massive impact because he had a huge audience share, you know, and it's because it had that huge audience share that he was able to galvanize action as quickly as he did. Because Mark and I were there at the recording of the Live Aid.
Band Aid. We were at Band Aid, Psalm Studios in Notting Hill. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like it all happens on the Sunday, and the following day spoken to Michael Graydon. It's going to be plugging it on BBC One at 5 to 7 or whatever, and it'll be on Top of the Pops on Thursday. And, you know, there was just that sense that things were moving forward. And, you know, Live Aid, the actual event, was the kind of the topper of it, I suppose.
Two things I think it also was responsible for, very briefly. One was it sort of created the stadium circuit. You know, people had either thought they didn't want to go to stadiums or had given up going to those kind of big events, looked at Live Aid on the telly with the blue sky and thought, that looks like fun. I'm going to start going to concerts again. It really boosted, and it extended the careers of all those people who we thought were slightly washed up. The Who, Queen, my God, their career could be started all over again, you know. And the other thing I think was that it started the appetite, created the appetite for that kind of those highly charged moments of mass connection that we've had since, where clearly people really, really enjoyed and needed that feeling of feeling the same way at the same moment. Often internationally, you know, the Mandela concert, Lady Di concert, even the George Floyd demonstrations very recently, I think. I can see echoes of Live Aid in that, of those moments with the whole world. And in the decline of big live television events, there aren't many of those moments around. And I think you can still feel its effect.
I think it's worth pointing out that I don't think Live Aid had as much impact worldwide as in Britain we like to think it did. You know, in Britain, you still had the BBC at that point, and you could still, they could ring it. Live Aid happened because Bob Geldof got Harvey Goldsmith and Mike Appleton in a room and said, we're going to do this. And Mike Appleton was the guy who could put it on, who died, only a few weeks ago, who was the guy who could put it on the television. He knew how to make it happen. Nobody else knew how to do that at all. So it happened so in Britain, it felt incredibly close to us. I think if you go to Texas or Russia or South America, I don't think you'd have the same sense of connection.
No, because a lot of them didn't see it at live.
No.
In fact, they just saw
and also
extracts.
it's mainly it's British bands and it's American bands and stuff. Probably more British bands than anywhere else. And I got a reminder of this when I think 10 years later I went to Tigray in Ethiopia to do a magazine piece about Ethiopia 10 years post Live Aid Band Aid. And I was interviewing a bunch of farmers from Tigray who'd been, there. They'd been sort of teenagers during the time of the terrible famine. And I had my interpreter was a guy who worked for the local aid services, but he was Ethiopian, but fabulous English, and had travelled and quite cosmopolitan. And I said, could you ask them if they've ever heard of Bob Geldof? And he turned to me and he said, who's Bob Geldof? And I think that tells you a lot.
It's sobering, isn't it?
It is. Whereas as far as, people present it in this country as if we saved the world. Well, no, you didn't really.
In America, I think they largely remember it as the thing that launched Madonna's career. Because Madonna was so successful at that. Because, the big rock bands, the great George Thorogood and the Destroyers, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, those people sprawled out across the stage. That doesn't make for very good television. But a girl doing her club act with her two dancers, one of them her brother, that little routine, which worked beautifully on television. And her whole career just never looked back, did it?
Well, it's interesting that, because I've just been writing about this, because I've just been writing a book about the British invasion of the United States, and, which kind of 1964, and then it kind of, there's a second British invasion in 83, 84, and then there's Live Aid. And I think Live Aid is kind of the end of that, really, because the people who emerge really big stars in the years following, huge stars, are Bruce Springsteen, Madonna, and Prince. They're all American and they're all solos. And America was conquered by British groups, and it was the groupness of them.
Yeah, it was the Animals, the Stones. That's right. Yeah,
that's what people liked about them, was groups. Whereas, move 20 years forward, what Bruce Springsteen and Madonna are about is individuality, and what they're also about is America. And so I think there was a bit of a shift post Live Aid. So you could say that it was the kind of last hurrah for quite a few of those smash hits favourites who had kind of prospered in the few years before then. Spandau Ballets and Adam Ant was famously.
Well, Adam Ant's performance was absolutely breathtaking. When you think about it, I think he was only on the bill because he was managed by the same person who managed the Police, and they said, well, all Sting. They said, if you're going to have Sting, you've got to have Adam, And Adam Ant made the worst decision imaginable, didn't he? Instead of going on and playing one or two songs that everybody knew and loved, he went on and did his new single. Am I right?
What's the one thing nobody wants to hear while brawling in the open air? At Wembley on a Saturday afternoon, your new single. I don't care who you are. We don't want to hear your new single. We want to hear your hits, We want to celebrate.
Well, Elvis Costello did an even better version of The Right Thing, which not only did he realise the importance of his playing his one song, but he played what I think he introduced as, he said, help me sing this old English northern folk song, and it was All You Need Is Love. And do you remember he had the words written on his hand, Dave?
Yeah.
Now, that's brilliant. So you actually don't even do one of your own songs. You play a song that will absolutely unite everybody. But Adam Ant, did we hear from him after that? Possibly not so much.
So, the rest of Smash It's, yes, there are other things in the mag.
Yeah, we need to talk about Lisa Stansfield and Chewy Raccoon. Come on.
The contents page tells us that there are song lyrics by OMD for Secrets, Animal Nightlife, Love is the Great Pretender, Fergal Sharkey, Loving You, Opus, Live is Life, Denise Lascelles, My Toot Toot, Jackie Graham, Round and Round, Toya, Soul Passing Through Soul, Phil Collins, Take Me Home, Conway Brothers, Turn It Up, Glenn Frey, Smuggler's Smuggler's Booze, Glenn Frey and Smuggler's Blues, and Billy Ocean, Mystery Lady. Gavin, got a little lyrics quiz for us, I believe.
I was thinking, we've done several of these podcasts now, and I mean, really the unique selling point of Smash Hits was the lyrics, wasn't it? But we rarely talk about the lyrics, so I thought, and there's some choice lyrics in this one, I've got to say, it's a particularly fine issue for crackers lyrics. So I've just taken a few kind of lines from several of the songs. Looking at that contents page, let's see if you can identify them, because they're not probably particularly well-known lines from songs. So let's try you with this one. Are you ready for some crazy poetry? Let's see if you can identify the singer and the song with this one. Beyond closed doors, the mirror hates the child I once knew. And out where the human race is, look at the wounded faces. Any takers?
That's got to be Toya.
Yay!
And Soul Within Soul, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, Soul Passing Through Soul.
Well done.
Well done, Tim. Very good.
Well, the sixth form lyrics were a bit of a giveaway, weren't they? Apologies, Toya.
All right, let's try this one. This one is quite a smooth lyric. Can I spend the night with you? Can I have your number? I'll be anything you want me to. We ought to get something started.
Is that Billy Ocean?
Very good. Mystery Lady by Billy Ocean, yeah. All right, let's try on another one. There's nice lyrics, those, aren't they?
I like the last line on that Billy Ocean song. Let me just find it. Page 46. Let me just jump through there. You need to be loved by me. Don't you want to be loved by me?
Please be loved by me.
Please.
Oh, go on. I think you might know this one. So you can look as much, but if you much as touch, you're going to have yourself a case. I'm going to break your face.
Don't mess with my toot toot.
Yes. Don't mess with Denise Lascelles' toot toot.
I mean, come on.
Let's try with the last one. Just a short one, this one. Don't wire, don't phone. It's Billy on the saxophone.
Oh.
Is it George Thorogood and the Destroyers? Are they in this week? Surprised they're not on the cover. Is it Fergal Sharkey?
It's not Fergal Sharkey.
Conway Brothers, Turn It Up.
It's not Conway Brothers. Sorry, guys. It's Animal Nightlife. Love is just a great pretender. See, it's the jazzy bit, isn't it?
Oh, well, the next line. And don't forget the Animalettes.
Yeah. Well, I thought that'd give it away if I said that, but
yeah.
That's the end of my lyrics quiz.
Well, let's have a look at Bitz, shall we? There is other things happening in the world of pop music in this week this fortnight in 1985, including the wedding of Nick Beggs from Kaja, not Kaja Gugu anymore, but Kaja, to his longtime girlfriend Boo, who now helps present ITV's Winner Takes All with Jimmy Tarby Tarbuck. They're so dreamy.
There's just too much to unpick there, isn't there?
Presumably she's now called Boo Biggs.
Hey!
Boo Biggs!
And the obsession with Andrew Ridgely's racing driving continues. The first time Andrew Ridgely had a go at this thing, motor racing, he crashed headfirst at 60 miles an hour into a barrier at Brands Hatch, and the race hadn't even started.
He's in all the time, and I think on the 1985 end of year issue, there's little images that say this was 1985, and obviously one of the pictures is Geldof with his fist in the air, and there's a picture of Madonna, and I think there's a picture of Prince. There's also a picture of Andy Ridgely with a cup of tea and his Renault jacket on as well. So that was the year. That was 1985, definitely.
And underneath that, the band that we've all been dying to talk about.
The Mighty Raccoon. Chewy Raccoon, to give them their full titles.
I'd like to enlighten us on Chewy Raccoon, Tim.
I wish I could. Or we don't know an awful lot about them, other than that they've got a song called Don't Touch Me. They hate cats and they love Cadbury's chocolate buttons, and they want to be revoltingly famous. And an attempt to find that song unless you found it, Simon. I couldn't find it on YouTube. There is another Chewy Raccoon song which is awful. It sounds like a demo or something. It doesn't sound like anything that would have ever been released. But yeah, there they are. Chewy Raccoon. The most anyone's spoken about them in years.
It's time for the Chewy Raccoon revival.
Bring it on.
Rise up, you raccoon hordes.
They were nearly on Live Aid, and then Adamant, they decided to let Adamant have a go because Chewy Raccoon were going to get a look in.
They look like the band in that TV ad. Was it for Twix or something like that? You can't sing, you can't dance, you'll go a long way.
That picture of China Crisis haunts me as well, because like China Crisis, like in my head, it was 2 members and then there's 5 of them. But is it me, or do they all look like they're related to each other? They all look like they sort of share a very small gene pool between them. I don't know really what's going on. The 2 lads on top of the shoulders are kind of like a mirror image of each other. Well, one looks a little bit more Wurzel Gummidge than the other one. And then 2 of the lads underneath look like they're both out of Brookside. And then the guy on the left looks like an amalgamation of the other 4. It's a strange look they've got going on there.
Well, bands do start to look like each other, don't they, apparently, after a while. If they spend enough time on a tour bus, they all start to resemble one another. So maybe that's what's happening. The members of China Crisis are gradually morphing into one Uber Crisis person.
Well, it's starting to more closely resemble Jimmy Hill, I think.
That's a good spot, yeah.
And actually, can I just draw your attention, just jumping back a page to the Animal Nightlife lyric again. I just can't leave these guys alone. But the guy on the far left playing the bass guitar, you see him?
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that Rick Astley or Ken from Bros?
Oh, it's got a resemblance.
Yeah, it looks like it could be in a... Yeah.
He looks like both of them at the same time. What else is going on in Bitz? Jackie Graham. So she'd recently put out her first album, and she's talking about how she used to play in a band going up and down the country, playing in pubs and clubs. Quite a pains to point out that it's not cabaret. But she's talking about that she used to hold down a full-time job at the same time. I just don't know how I managed it, she giggles. The lads used to pick me up from work, and then we'd drive north, south, east, or wherever. I think she might mean west there. And do our stuff. At the time, we were doing covers of chart stuff, not cabaret, and then we'd pack all the gear away and get back to Birmingham around 5 or 6 in the morning. Then I'd have a couple of hours sleep and it'd be back to work. I'd get my head down at lunchtime, get someone to go down to the pub and buy me a sausage or something, go back to work, and then the whole cycle would start again.
Yeah, that really tickled me when I was reading through that, and she talks about having a sausage in the pub. It's not very glamorous, is it?
Not at all, but I'm wondering if Round and Round is actually about a Cumberland sausage, which is famously, sold by the yard from a Coyle.
Coyle, who also get a mention on page 15, along with Throbbing Gristle, under the 400 Blows interview.
Oh, nice segue, Tim.
It's all related. And there, a young Lisa Stansfield as part of a group called the Blue Zone. The new groupette featuring Lisa Stansfield, ex-presenter of Razzmatazz. I don't remember them at all, but there you go.
Well, I looked this up because I don't remember Blue Zone. Apparently, the guys in Blue Zone then went and wrote some of the bigger hits, and I think they realised that people were more interested in Lisa than Blue Zone, and I think they kind of hung back and graciously put her in the spotlight, and she sort of kind of eventually left Blue Zone behind and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think that they may still be. I think she may still be married to one of them. I'm not sure, but yeah. So, but yeah, I don't remember that at all. I don't even remember her on Razzmatazz, but
vaguely.
There's no expense spared with those hula hoops covered with chiffon, is there, in the photo?
It's probably toilet roll, right? To be fair.
And then there are flies all over the page as well, which I didn't understand until we get to the end.
Ah. Yeah, where all the flies are piling up in a heap at the bottom of the last bit, the last feature within Bitz, the bit of Bitz. It's about AC/DC's new album, Fly on the Wall, and it's a bit of a competition there.
And you can win some AC/DC fly spray.
Just what I've always wanted.
Probably very, very rare item to own now if it hasn't exploded.
We get what feels like ever so quickly to the singles reviews on page 21, reviewed by William Shaw in this issue of The Hits. And this was the Smash Hits edition of Smash Hits where I discovered that Tipp-Ex thinner If you drop some on the page and then rubbed it with some tissue, you could actually rub out big sections of the page. I've completely rubbed out the review of Madonna's Into the Groove for some reason. And my friend Liam Shaw, has got rid of the beginning of William Shaw's name, so it makes it look like Liam Shaw has written done the singles reviews. So he's got rid of the WIL, so it just says Liam Shaw. But luckily, I have a second copy of this issue, so I can see it all in full. And young William makes The Cure, In Between Days, his single of the fortnight, joint single of the fortnight, with The Moon is Blue by Colourbox. Any singles there that leap out to you, either from the review or that you bought at the time? Gavin?
Well, yeah, the Cure one, obviously, that's one of their great singles, that, isn't it? And a well-deserved single of the fortnight. Not so sure about the Colourbox one. I did give it a look on YouTube, and after one play I was unconvinced as to the qualities of that. I know they went on to sort of collaborate on the Pump Up the Volume thing, which is great, but yeah, not so keen on The Moon is Blue. Otherwise, he takes a few wrong turns, doesn't he? I mean, when he's talking about Madonna, Into the Groove, which is obviously a classic Madonna single now when we look back and think of it, but he says, he describes it as plodding run-of-the-mill disco, dare I say. And he says you do much better listening to Weird Al Yankovic's version of Like a Surgeon. So I think we can say he kind of got that one a little bit wrong.
Yeah, but he's favourable about Adamant.
Yeah, well, that's it. He's all right about Adamant, but Prince, who seems to crop up in every single issue of Smash Hits singles reviews, and he doesn't seem to like Raspberry Beret that much either. He just says it's 60. He says it's an addictive chorus, but he doesn't kind of say too much about it. But yeah, like you say, Adamant, he says, if I hadn't peaked, I'd have sworn this was Gary Glitter. But then these days, Adam does seem to leap wildly from one style to the next. A stormingly blustering piece of rock and roll fun. And yeah, it's hard to disagree with that, really. Anything grab your eye there, Tim?
I don't think, because at this point I still wasn't buying my own records. Amazingly, that would follow sort of towards Christmas, and I would start buying things like U2. But anyway, yeah, there's no. I'll tell you what there are here. There are two not very good cover versions of great songs. So one is Philip Bailey's version of Children of the Ghetto, which is a Real Thing track, which put that on the playlist. That's an absolutely fantastic song. But Philip Bailey kind of doesn't really do it justice. He updates it for 1985, which didn't really need doing. And also Loose Ends, which Loose Ends are great, but I don't remember their cover of Bowie's Golden Years. But William Shaw seems to like it. There's not much cop either. We could have worked out really well that a sort of funky version of Golden Years, but yeah, it's not aged well, that one.
No, they performed it on the Lenny Henry show, which was where I heard it. And obviously being a big Bowie fan, I was like, ooh, what's this? And then it's like, oh, yeah, not sure about that. It's not. Loose Ends had done some great songs, but that one just doesn't quite hit the mark. I was quite into Go West back in 85, but Goodbye Girl, which was their third single, wasn't into that. I mean, bands had to have a ballad back then, didn't they? And that was their ballad. You've got to show a bit of variety. But out of those records, I bought The Cure, In Between Days, and Prince Raspberry Beret.
I was going to say, no surprise to know that I bought Viva La Rock a few days later. It was written about in my diary. I think it was a couple of days later. And bizarrely enough, in a little twist of fate, there's a link to this podcast with Viva La Rock, because a few record store days ago, Adamant was in a certain record shop in Liverpool, and Tim got my copy of that very single signed to Gavin from Adamant, along with my copy of Car Trouble as well. So that's come full circle. That's nice, isn't it, Tim? What was he like when you met him? Was he all right, Tim?
He was lovely. Adam, poor old fellow. He was a bit. They hadn't quite realised how many people were going to show up to see him. We were thinking, maybe 100, and there was this enormous queue, and it was snaking around the block. Half of Liverpool turned up to get his autograph. I think we ended up turning people away because he had to get off and do his show. He was in dire straits, literally. And I did get the chance to put my arm around him, get your album signed, and get a nice copy of Dirt Wears White Socks signed. And my last vision of Ant was him being bundled up the back stairs by my colleagues Anthony and Carl, who run that record shop in Liverpool, to the exit at the back, so that Beatlemania style he could escape from this enormous throng of fans and get to the gig. It was the most rock and roll thing you can imagine. Vive le rock that day, that's for sure.
Gav, do you want to take us through that Human League feature there and introduce us to it?
Yeah, this is Tom Hibbert. Talks about Dare selling squillions of copies, and it says, things look pretty all right for the brilliant conceived pop combo from Sheffield. Then things started to go horribly wrong. Their next LP, Hysteria, took ages to make, and when it did come out, not many people bought it. Then the group all went a bit mad. So what went wrong? And we find out a little bit about the madness, really, that was going on in this article. It's quite an odd one. I mean, sitting on a park bench, we don't know. He says that they're in the studio polishing off a new long-playing waxing. I presume they're down in London somewhere. It doesn't actually say whereabouts they are. And it says that Phil is growing mutton chop whiskers. Mutton chop whiskers? Yes, I wanted to look like Monkey off that Chinese TV programme, he says. But instead I look like the lead singer in the Flying Pickets. Serves me right. They're coming off this afternoon. He confesses he's quite open about going a little bit potty. He says, I have examples of famous names I won't mention who'd gone through the process, the process of sort of fame and then lunacy and egomania that ensued, and who actually warned us about it. It was really depressing because they turned out to be right. But those same people who warned us about going potty and then went potty again themselves, we weren't so bad. We didn't become socially odd, but we were exhibiting strange little character things. And then Phil talks about tinkering obsessively with machines and just really getting into TV. It kind of paints a bit of a picture of him sort of, just going slightly frayed around the edges. Tim, were you a big Human League fan? I know you liked your electronic music.
Yeah, I mean, just purely in terms of liking them as on a purely pop level at the time, I've subsequently grown more fond of them. I think their stuff sounds, it's aged. That music has aged really well. But this is a strange interview, and I've forgotten just how long they'd taken this. It's 2.5 years is an awful long time in pop, especially in the early 80s. There's no way they're going to be on at Live Aid. Clearly, they are skirting the edges of the dump. You're right. Modern Romance are down there, beckoning them down with members of Joe Boxers. Clearly. But he seems happy enough. I think the album they're working on is that album Crash, which they did with Jam and Lewis, and it's got two absolutely cracking tunes, and it's got Love Is All That Matters, and what's the other one, Human, which so they've still got some. There's still a bit of pop left in the league. But it's a strange interview, and his style. If you look at him on the first picture there, he does still look like he's out of 19. He looks more 1983 than 1985. I'm not quite sure whether they've quite figured out where they fit in. He'd obviously had a big hit with Giorgio Moroder with Electric Dreams, and he's promoting the follow-up, which I don't think it grazed. Don't think it troubled the charts. So they're in a sort of weird hinterland, aren't they, between the Giddy Carousel and the Dumper. And they would, like I said, I think they got another spin on the carousel with Human and Love Is All That Matters. But It
is kind of odd trying to find out why this piece is in here, and it's not clear because it's kind of billed as a Human League, but it was just talking to Phil Oakey, and then there is just that passing mention of Electric Dreams and that there's another single out, and actually the album that Phil Oakey did with Giorgio Moroder had just come out that week. And that's not mentioned anywhere. And you'd think that had at least been mentioned so that there's so you got some idea of why this piece was in there. But it just kind of feels it's just kind of been dropped in. It's like, why is that there? The Electric Dreams had been the end of the year before. So it just felt really odd. And it took me actually a little bit of digging to find out the reason for this being in here.
Yeah, and what's surprising as well, that he slags off Electric Dreams in this. Tom says, why did he do Electric Dreams in the first place? And Phil says, it was just a quick thing to do in a robot-like fashion. They sent me a tape, I wrote the words and popped down to London for 2 hours one afternoon and did it. I never liked that song. It was just an old-fashioned synth record, sub-romantic and a bit sentimental, but my words were good. I mean, Electric Dreams is a classic, right? It's a fantastic song.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. And they actually tag it on to the Best of the Human League now, don't they? Even though it's a solo single, really. But melodically, it has got that Giorgio Moroder's an old Schlager man, really, isn't it? And it's got that more of kind of old-fashioned sort of melodic sense to it, whereas Human League are much more stronger and a little bit off-kilter, I suppose. But I think he was just excited to be working with Giorgio, but I think he was expecting to get another Donna Summer, I Feel Love, rather than Electric Dreams and whatever the title of that other track is that we've glossed over in the interview.
Goodbye Bad Times, there we are.
That's it, yeah.
And he's not too complimentary about his fellow pop stars either. We met Duran Duran on Top of the Pops when they were a joke. Everyone was talking about Spandau Ballet, and there were these upstarts trying to be Spandau Ballet called Duran Duran. And after that, we were going to the Top of the Pops, and we were getting smaller, and they were getting bigger and bigger. Then he talks about he doesn't know if they'll be as popular again, but he kind of hopes so when the next album comes out.
Another couple of quick things I wanted to mention, because it is a very strange interview. He talks about TV and he wants to kind of start making exciting TV on an exploitation basis. I don't quite know what he means. And he says, I do have a weakness for seeing topless women on TV, which is a bit odd. I quite like seeing famous people without their clothes on. I think there's quite a lot of men that like, seeing topless women. It's not that odd. I don't know. I'm just saying, And another very strange thing is when he starts talking about Princess Diana and Prince Charles, he says, Tom Hibbett says, well, what, like who do you find attractive? And he says, gives a little list, and then he says, Princess Diana is hopeless, absolutely hopeless, a massive con job on the world. It's not her fault. She's probably all right. Prince Charles is definitely all right. He's doing all the things the Human League are doing. And then Tom Hibbett says, pardon? Let it pass. So I have no idea what he's on about there.
So there's an unreleased solo album with Giorgio Moroder and Prince Charles. Right? Synth pop album we must hear.
Shall we take a look at RSVP?
Yes, let's. Always one of my favourite.
The one that spoke to me was, hi, I'm 12 in September. Well, this could have been me writing, because I was going to be 12 that September. And whoever's editing the letters here says, congratulations. I'm crazy about Prince, and I also like The Time, Sheila E. and Madonna. But that's important, isn't it? It's July, but she's saying, I'm going to be 12 in September, which is very important at that age. We get some more heavy metal haters as well. Hi, my name is Hayley, and I love Wham and Nick Kershaw. I hate heavy metal and mods. And then there's a letter from a hedgehog.
Yeah, very bizarrely. I'm a self-confessed gorgeous male hedgehog. People think I get very big-headed, but that's only because I'm so beautiful. I'm into everything except Wham. 15 to 17-year-old girls, very specific. Right to, the hedgehogs rule okay. Committed. Yeah. And then the address. I read that out to Lynn last night, and she said he's trying too hard.
Well, Kate, who's 13, she's into having a good time and digs Rainbow, Status Quo and most heavy stuff, but also likes Tears for Fears, Dead or Alive, King and Phil Collins. So one there for the metalers.
Well, I think they should have reached out to Teresa, who is from Eccleston. Who says, I'm a Bucks Fizz fan. Anyone with things about them, write to me. They could have really used her later on in their magazine when we get to the Bucks Fizz audition section, where they interview a series of people who've turned up to audition to be replacement for Jay Aston in Bucks Fizz, all of whom look like they could quite easily step into her formidable shoes. But to a woman, pretty much all of them, when called upon as to whether they actually like the Fizz and their oeuvre, unanimously a bit non-committal at very best as to their love for the Fizz. So if only Teresa from Eccleston, if only she'd got herself down to the audition, she could have been the new Jay Aston. Because she's the only person who likes Bucks Fizz in the whole issue, apparently.
Yeah, I've got to say, she's a lone voice there.
On the next page from RSVP, we've got an advert for Bruce Springsteen, Glory Days, and it's Bruce in concert with his guitar, looking slightly sweaty and earnest and really meaning it, man, and I'm just a prisoner to rock and roll and all. And the caption above it says, imagine this picture 5 times as big, in colour and on your wall. Well, you wouldn't, would you? You wouldn't want that. Who'd want that? Even Bruce Springsteen wouldn't want that.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it would terrify you. It's horrible.
Can anyone measure it and find out how big that would be? I don't think I've got a wall big enough for that. Yeah.
But there was a thing in the 80s for big posters, wasn't there?
Yeah. They tear really easily.
And there's Toyah on the opposite page. What one for all the pervs out there?
Well, Phil Oakey would like that one.
Well, Phil Collins is getting his eye in, isn't he?
Gavin, would you like to...
Well, yes. Phil Collins, he's got a strange sort of monkeyish kind of pose there, and he's got very creased crotch in his trousers. I don't want to look too much at his trouser area, but... and then he's staring across the page at what can only be described as Toyah's breasts, really, that are encased in a translucent sort of emerald bodice. I'm not quite sure what it is she's wearing. I don't know if she knows what she's wearing. But Phil's getting a right good look.
I think it's painted on. I don't think she's actually... I think she's possibly just... It's just a sort of oil paint.
Really?
Don't know. I've not studied it that closely, I'll be honest.
It's got a very high sheen on it.
Don't know. I mean, let's not just sit here staring at... There's 3 middle-aged men now staring at a picture of Toyah. Now, to be fair...
I've clicked off it already.
Now, to be fair as well, Ms. Wilcox is definitely loitering perilously close to the to joining members of Joe Boxers and Roman Holiday and the Dumper, surely. I'm impressed that they're still printing her lyrics. I don't think she'd had a hit for... So she certainly wasn't in the queue for Live Aid. She'd not had a hit for some years. But yeah, they're still sticking with Toyah, aren't they?
I was just looking on Wikipedia to see Soul Passing Through Soul and where it got up to. And unsurprisingly, yes, it failed to enter the top 40 and peaked at number 57. Even Viva La Rock went higher than that. So, yeah. Yeah, the next feature we get to is the Bucks Fizz audition, as Tim alluded to earlier. Jay Ashton has split from The Fizz and they're looking for a replacement. So they hold an audition in London. Is it in London? Yes, at the Prince of Wales Theatre. Applicants had to be no taller than 5'4", so as not to dwarf the tiny fellas, and come with their own sheet music, prepared to sing and dance and beam and dazzle. On a grey Friday morning, 800 so-called hopefuls formed a queue around the building, or 801 actually, if you count Smash Hit's very own undercover auditionee stooge Karen Kay. If I get this job, I'll kill you, warned Karen, ex-bass player of punky girl group The Gym Slips and not a Fizz fan. Something she has in common with apparently the other 800 women that turned up. Luckily, she didn't get the audition, and she said it was they took them in 50 at a time. And there were these men in suits and women and a woman writing things down, and we had a sort of parade about like a beauty contest, and they just said you, and you, and picked 3 out of the 50, and then said to the rest of us, leave as quickly and quietly as possible. No, thank you very much for coming, or anything like that. So it sounds quite a dispiriting audition in every sense. And as Tim said, there's a sort of a vox pop with quite a number of the young ladies that auditioned. And the one thing they all seem to have in common, there's some brunettes, there's some blondes, there's some with rope around their head, some with big bubbly perms. There's every kind of every hairstyle and clothing sense. A lot of white. Lots of white clothes, but the main thing is that none of them really seem to like Bucks Fizz at all. I'm particularly attracted to Alison from Surrey, who's on the left of Zandre from London, who's the one with the big chunky rope round her forehead. And she looks a bit like the replicant out of Blade Runner. She says, I haven't decided what to sing. God knows why I'm here. I sincerely love Bucks Fizz. Brackets detectable note of sarcasm here. So... I don't really know why they all went, but there you go.
Dominique above her from Hampton. I should be in college today, but it's maths, and I don't really like maths. Bucks Fizz, their image used to be a bit too glossy, but now Jay's gone, I think they're looking to change to something more sellable. Long hair and bodices, something like that. I like any music apart from reggae and punk. I don't mind heavy metal. I can get into that.
I like Susanna from Guildford, and she's going to sing Will You by Hazel Connor. And she's witheringly signs off by saying, Bucks Fizz are all right, but I prefer music that's a bit more substantial. She should get a job writing for the NME. Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, they're all kind of blotting their copybook a bit with this, because if they had got the job and then Bucks Fizz had read about it in Smash Hits afterwards, and they're saying, I don't really like Bucks Fizz, the music's not very substantial, I don't know what I'm doing here. I think they'd have had a very short tenure in the group.
I think Bucks Fizz would probably agree with them, to be honest.
We must mention Zandre, spelled Xandre, after her granny. I mean, yeah, who's got like a rope around her head. She's reminding me, she looks like one of the sort of like female villains off Doctor Who. She probably would have been zapping him with some sort of laser gun later on. And she's going to do, I mean, dear God, I can imagine when she walks into the audition, she's going to sing Diana Ross's Last Time I Saw Him. And she's doing 2 songs. She's already decided she's having 2 numbers. She's doing Diana Ross and Yesterday by the Beatles. I sing in my dad's group. His surname's Cooper. We were called the Cooper Cuties. But I'm a secretary now with that rope around her head. So, yeah. She doesn't like Bucks Fizz either. She prefers Dead or Alive, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Paul Young and Howard Jones. So in a way, Xandra, she's just like the rest of us, really, isn't she?
Well, I was wondering, because they have them barriers up. They would have had it in the swanky nightclubs in London, to stop people getting in or to stop them from going in the VIP area. The barriers up where it's roped off. And it looks like she's pinched the rope from one of those barriers and just kind of stuck it round her head.
Yeah, at the back, it's still got a little tag on saying "Do not enter, VIP only." But nowadays, this is a nice little bit of investigative journalism by Smash Hits. But nowadays, they'd make a 6-part TV series about this on ITV1, wouldn't they? Find the new Bucks Fizz member, right? So they just a little magazine article right at the back of Smash Hits now.
While we're talking about Bucks Fizz, we should mention, because I don't think we've talked about it before, the fantastic performance. I'm sure you both know what I'm talking about. Is it a German TV show?
Yes.
Where they sing, I can't remember the name of the song, it's sort of late period Fizz, and they're kind of on in sort of what can only be described as perv gear, really, and they're playing like, you've seen it, right?
Yeah, it's brilliant. There's a little kid with his mum at the front, isn't there?
Yeah, they're playing for some families, and there's a young lad at the front who does not know where to look, and his mum's staring at him. It's the funniest thing. I wish I could remember the name of the song, but I'm sure Say will find it and put it in the video list. But I know it's not from this period particularly, but it's fantastic.
I think it was "If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen." And the little lad at the front, he's probably a little bit young. They're all properly dolled up in proper like fetish gear as well. But Egg Baker and they're properly styling it out. Mike Nolan's loving it. He's he looks like he's been doing that all his life, but. Yeah, it's really funny. And the little lad at the front, he's just he's like, what? Looking all around, Imagine watching when you're a little kid and something a little bit saucy comes on the telly and your mum and dad are there. And it's an awful cringe-worthy moment and you're just staring at the floor and usually there's a tut. Oh, look at that. Disgraceful. And imagine that, but you're being filmed while doing it on television. Amazing.
We should also mention the winner of the competition to join Bucks Fizz is Shelley Preston from Wareham in Dorset. And I had a quick look online. She was with Bucks Fizz, and then obviously there were some inter-band wrangles. So she was then with the original Bucks Fizz, sang with the Brian May Band, and then it says in 2001 she was invited to join chill out lounge band Cloudfish with Steve Norman from Spandau Ballet, who then she was married to, and they divorced in 2015. So she had quite a pop life for a while, being in the Fizz and married to Steve Honkin Norman out of the Spans. Skipping through a few pages, and we get to a 2-page feature, one of which is a big photo of him, is Belouis, Some, the 2-hit wonder.
Was it that many?
It says 3 years ago. There's some people, and yeah, 3 years ago, Neville Keithley was on the dung heap and a bit fed up, but then he changed his name, and hey presto, he now gets to sing with incredibly famous musicians, to drink cocktails with international celebrities, and to lie around swanky hotel swimming pools with Frankie Goes to Hollywood. It's all right for some, says Dave Rimmer. So you join us in Hollywood at the Sunset Marquis Hotel. Picture the scene. There's Belouis Some sitting around having a cocktail. Holly Johnson's over there. Lamal pads purposely about in a pair of baggy floral swimming trunks. The other members of Frankie are splashing around in the water. Record producers and various record industry and music biz folks all around. And Neville Keithley is about to release his 3rd British single, Some People, and he's living the life. He's supporting Frankie Goes to Hollywood. His look's changed a bit, as it said earlier on in the introduction. 3 years ago he was, all washed up, but now here he is with the band who are one of the hottest bands in the world at this moment, Frankie. And all he seems to be doing with his time is just chucking people into swimming pools, really. That's kind of his main hobby by the...
And getting trolleyed.
Yeah, getting trolleyed, chatting at women and pushing people into swimming pools. Tim, I feel like I should pass over to you.
No, I just, reading this, I just developed a sort of pathological dislike of this man. Can you imagine what incredibly tedious company he must be? So, watch out, Belouis about, right? Things are going to get crazy. Belouis had a few gins and he's going to throw people, he hilariously throws his female press officer in the swimming pool twice. Oh, how she must have laughed. Oh, going off to wash my clothes again. Belouis chucked me in the pool again. So, I just really took a dislike to this guy. And especially the way he signs off with, I'm a decadent rock and roller. We just just get you straight down the dumper now, you, right? And also, last night we had a little chat on WhatsApp, didn't we, about his sexy video. So I'm sure it'll be on the video playlist, the full-length version of the Video for Imagination, which I think was a huge kind of video jukebox hit, not because of Belouis and his completely forgettable, featureless face and his hideous blonde proto-Eminem kind of hair. It was because the video is stacked full of very short clips of completely incomprehensible Arcadia bonkers plot to it, and it goes on for about an hour, and it's got lots of nudity and females in various states of undress, and some sort of nod to The Shining where he gets in bed with the woman and she turns into an old lady and all that kind of thing. It's hideously awful and quite amusing at the same time. Any sort of erotic charge that this video may have had is completely dissipated the moment that Belouis' visage hooves into view, completely throwing cold water over any excitement that may have been generated by the erotic happenings in this video. I've given more thought to old Argos catalogues from 1985 and jumble sales that I particularly enjoyed than this tedious, boring idiot. His appalling, featureless face and his habit of throwing women into swimming pools. So yes, Mr. Sum, I send you straight to the dumper. Joe Boxers are there and you can sit and have a drink with them, and you can chuck as many people into the pool as you like in the dumper where you belong, sir. Let's hope he doesn't follow you guys on Twitter, because that's... Go
straight to the dumper. Do not pass go. Do not collect £200.
Yes. I really hope he doesn't follow you guys on Twitter, because I just lost you a Twitter follower there from Belouis. But yeah.
He's still out there doing his thing, but looking at him and looking at him in the video as well, he just looks like a right arrogant knobhead, and I think knobhead is probably the right word to describe him. Just that look in his eyes, he's just got contempt in his eyes, and he looks pretty much wasted on that photo as well in Smash Hits. But I was doing a bit of digging, just trying to find out, how did such a pointless pop star with the most vacuous music get to be in Smash Hits and in the charts? And it turns out, on his album, he's got most of David Bowie's band from Let's Dance and Young Americans playing on there. Carlos Alomar, David Bowie's guitarist for many years, is like his band leader. He's got Robin Clark, who was singing with Simple Minds in 85, but sang with David Bowie on Young Americans. He's got half of Chic on there. So an amazing group of musicians just playing the most awful music. So, imagination and some people are basically just three notes repeated over and over and over in just some sort of like ersatz funk kind of way, with all the, all the energy that the musicians could muster. But even they can't make it shine or anything like that. But it says here about the beginnings of the band as it originally was. After 5 weeks of rehearsals, he began playing odd nights at London's Embassy Club and soon began pulling crowds. One night the crowd was the Duran Duran party after the Prince's Trust concert 2 years ago. Duran managers Paul and Michael Barrows were just starting a publishing company and offered Neville's manager a deal after hearing him play just one song. 2 days later, Neville was a fully fledged recording artiste. And I think it's that Duran Duran connection that's quite telling. He's on the same record label, but also I think with the Imagination video, they were trying to pull a girls on film stunt. So like Godley and Cream did that video for Girls on Film for Duran Duran, which I think was like the second or third single. Quite controversial at the time with, was it female wrestlers or boxers or something like that? Wrestlers, yeah. And it all gets a bit kind of sordid and whatnot. And I think they're just repeating that trick just to get him some attention. And it didn't work. I think they released this single about 4 times before it actually made it into the top 20 in 1986. And it's just vapid. It's a vacuum. That's what Belouis Sum is a vacuum. He needs to get in the dumper with Jimmy the Hoover.
Jimmy the Hoover were better.
Oh, way better.
Well, I think this brings us to our last feature in this edition of The Hits. It's William Shaw talking to the Redskins. They think Live Aid is sickening. They reckon the Queen must feel a complete wally. They want to bring down post-war consumer capitalism. They're fed up with being called dingbats. William Shaw sympathises with the Redskins. And he takes them down to Fleet Street to do an interview with them. Because the latest single, Bring It Down, This Insane Thing, is all about the tabloid press. The Redskins have got it in for the Red Tops. And talking about the video for the song, obviously, they were quite a very serious, very left-wing, right-on band. And in the video for the song, the Redskins are seen ripping up copies of tabloid newspapers. And to star in it, they've got none other than lefty comedian Alexis Sale, all dolled up to look like Daily Mirror owner Robert Maxwell and dancing around like a gross spitting image puppet. How did Sale get roped into this? Roped in, sputters Chris. He wasn't roped in. That makes him sound like a whale or something. Well, he's bald, continues Chris. What more could we want? Martin Hawes, bassist and the other half of the Redskins, answers a touch more seriously. We always get accused of being humorless and serious and all that sort of crap. So we thought we'd get someone funny in the video. But we got Alexis Sale instead. Ho ho, blurts Chris. I don't know if you had a little look at the video, and it's not even funny.
No.
It's still serious. You can't tell it's Alexis Sale either.
No, you have to kind of squint a bit to see it's Alexis Sale. And, he was a very well-known comic at the time, but, well, it still is today. But there's not really a lot of humour in it, is it? And you do feel after watching it, I mean, it's not a terrible video, but you do feel a bit bludgeoned around the head by all the stock footage and the...
Yeah, I mean, they weren't a terrible band either.
No.
And it's actually quite a good piece. It's quite a lively piece. And it's something different to the usual, well, certainly different to the Belouis Sum piece. At least the Redskins have got a point to their existence and don't just want to be famous and getting trolleyed every night on Frankie Goes to Hollywood's expenses account. But yeah, it is quite an enjoyable piece. We're a Marxist-Leninist rock and roll band whose opinions are pretty far to the left of Ken Livingstone, Tony Benn and even Paul Weller.
I have to say, I don't really remember them very well at all. I mean, it's good that there's a voice of dissent again in this issue and they're not blanket praising Live Aid and all it stands for. So I guess they're there to create a little bit of balance. My only memory of this group, and I know lots of people really love them. I think they've still got a following to this day. My only memory is them of, there was a magazine called The Hits. Does anyone remember this? It was almost like a grown-up smash hits. And I think my sister got it, and it had stapled to the front a 7-inch single, which has got, I think, Simply Red, Style Council, Jesus and Mary Chain, and the Redskins. So the Red theme ran out after 2 tracks, but it's very 1985 kind of cool music, isn't it? So, and it's got a big boxing glove on the front. And I remember that. I remember playing the Jesus and Mary Chain track, which I think is a B-side. I can't remember. Was it Kill Surf City or something? What is it?
Taste of Cindy.
Taste of Cindy, yeah. So I remember putting that on.
I'll tell you exactly what it's on, because it's in my hand. Yeah, Redskins, Kick Over the Statues, the Ramsey McKinnock mix, Simply Red, Every Bit of Me, Style Council, Walls Come Tumbling Down, Live at Manchester Apollo, and yeah, that Jesus and Mary Chain track with Bobby Gillespie on drums.
Okay, so I remember that one more than the others, because that is that's quite something. That's the first time I heard any of their stuff properly. So, yeah, that's my only memory of... I don't remember playing the Redskins song very often. I don't think we thought a lot of it. Well, it wouldn't have been my sort of thing then. Shouty, skinheady, punky music, really. But fair play to them.
As Tim said, there's a nice kind of... It's nice that there's a bit of balance there, because obviously at the beginning of the magazine there's many, many pages devoted to Live Aid. And we talked earlier as well about how the other weekly papers like The Melody Maker and The NME were a lot more critical of the event, and there is at least a little bit of balance in Smash Hits. He asks, what do you think of the Live Aid project? Sickening, come Chris's angry reply. When you see it from the inside in particular, and you see all the agents scrambling to get their bands on, it's got damn all to do with high-minded ideals. It's quite revolting in the way that it's worked. And then it says, Martin storms in. It's the same companies who've donated their proceeds from Band Aid to Ethiopia that are precisely the ones who are making people in Ethiopia starve. I wouldn't particularly criticise Bob Geldof. The bloke thinks he's genuinely doing something. But basically it's charity, and charity never solved anything and never will do. All these people who are given donations, yeah, it does help to relieve the starvation, but in 5 years' time that starvation is going to be back again. So a little bit of balance with what had gone on earlier on in the paper, which I think is is a healthy thing, whether you agree with them or not. It's I think it's good to sort of have that debate and to have that voice of dissent in there.
Well, he's got a point, hasn't he?
yeah, and I think someone mentioned the politics in America in particular earlier on, and he's talking there about seeing it from the inside and the agents trying to get their bands on. And we know that there was a big bounce after Live Aid, and that lots of bands had a massive upsurge in album sales, and you don't know really what went on behind the scenes, but there must have been some shady dealings here and there, I'm sure, or some kind of little agreements made and stuff. So
it's only rock and roll.
Yeah.
But it feels like the piece is just getting going, and then it ends with, so what's your favourite colour? I suppose you want us to say red.
Yeah, it's quite an abrupt ending, isn't it?
End of piece. So that brings us to the end of this edition of The Hits. Obviously dominated very much by Live Aid, but looking back at this one, I guess it was inevitable really that so much of the magazine was going to be devoted to it. But in terms of the rest of the content, as we say these days, I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Tim?
There's not a huge amount left in it. Thank goodness. Thank goodness for Live Aid. They had obviously held back, and I'd say they got this edition out really quickly after the event. Otherwise, they'd have been definitely looking in reception, desperately hoping that Marilyn or Toyah were lurking to get them to come and do a feature. What it does say, and I did look at the previous edition, and there is a preview of Live Aid, and there are various predictions, one of which is that Bono is going to do a 23-minute version of Smoke on the Water. Well, I mean, apart from the song, they weren't far wrong there, were they?
I mean, yeah, the rest of the issue, yeah, it is. It feels like all the energy has been sucked into the first 10 pages on Live Aid, and that's taken sort of 90% of the effort and time and energy, and then the rest, it's a little bit kind of will that do, isn't it? I mean, I think the interview with Phil Oakey is very entertaining and quite strange, but I really enjoyed reading that. Not so much Mr. Sun. I mean, and to be fair as well, the Bucks Fizz piece was quite a giggle as well. I enjoyed that. The next issue looks good. There's a little advert for the next issue. There's not a lot of information, but it says coming up on July the 31st, Tom Bailey, The Smiths, Adamant, Go West and The Cure. So for The Smiths, Adamant and The Cure, I'd have definitely been all over that one. So I'd have probably got more out of the next issue, to be honest, than I did this one. I was still nursing a bit of a Live Aid hangover when this came out. And the other stuff that was in the magazine, there wasn't really an awful lot that appealed to me, but... And as William Shaw said, it was such an amazing effort to get it out. You think in those days to get out a magazine of Smash Its quality in 4 days after Live Aid is really going some. So, hats off to them. Very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is, out of all the issues of Smash Hits that I've kept, and we know that I've kept a lot, this is undoubtedly my most read, my most looked at one, simply because of the Live Aid feature and reading along when I was listening to the tapes that I'd taped off the radio. But talking about that next issue, on the letters page, unsurprisingly, it opens with, I would like to thank every single person involved in the Live Aid concert. It was, without doubt, the most memorable day of my life. Truly the day to remember. Lisa, London. And the comment from that by Black Type is about 17 trillion letters in a similar vein. Well, we all seem to be in agreement on this one for once. Bob Geldof, God bless your mom. And a Live Aid hangover on the back of that one with a nice photo of David Bowie and Mick Jagger in their Dancing in the Street video.
Lovely.
Well, thank you, Tim, for joining us once again on the Giddy Carousel of Pop. Hope you've enjoyed your second trip and you haven't got too dizzy there.
It's been a blast. It's been a real white-knuckle ride. I'm ready to get off now. I'm feeling slightly sick.
Are you going to stay in the fairground in case we need you again?
I'll be loitering next to the coconut shy. You can bet your life. Yeah. As soon as when you run out of actual smash hits writers, and when Neil Tennant has finally been on the show, and all the rest of your hit list, I guess give me a call. I'll still be here in reception.
And thanks to you for listening. Come and say hello to us at Giddy Pop Pod on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, or on our website, giddypoppod.home.blog, where you'll also find the links to the edition of Smash Hits that we've been looking at, along with those Spotify and YouTube playlists for that extra layer of experience. And we hope you can join us next time on the Giddy Carousel of Pop.
My final words are, don't mess with my toot-toot.